In a game, in the Woldberry Forest, a warrior is badly wounded. And not only that, he's completely surrounded with his fallen friends beside him. A guy tells his lady that even after everything, a certain person still hasn't shown up, so he wants to know what they're going to do. With a sinister look, she orders them to eliminate everyone. Thus, the executioner, without a second thought, charges at the warriors to wipe them out. The warrior looks back, expecting the worst, but someone moves swiftly in the shadows, and with incredible agility and power, intercepts the attacking executioner. The warriors get excited when they see it's Jihyun. One of the Imperial soldiers realizes it's Hirkin, and quickly shouts for everyone to capture him. But Hirkin hears the order and, filled with power, moves rapidly and cuts down the one who gave the command. Not only him, but also the others who were approaching. He looks back with a mocking smile, covered in blood, and asks if they really think that all ganging up on him will change anything, since he knows none of them are good enough. This is Ermri Hirkin. His real name is Jihyun, from the Hadi Mass Guild, and his nickname is Hero Slayer. His friends start apologizing and saying it was all their fault, because they didn't realize those people were the ones hunting them. Hirkin puts away his sword and makes it clear they don't need to apologize. He says that and extends his hand to help them. Then he reassures them that he's fine and tells them to get up. His friends are moved, having been saved once again. But Hirkin keeps emphasizing that, honestly, none of what's happening is their fault. And, looking at the person sitting and watching, he concludes that they're the real pathetic losers, since the real problem is people who can't fight fairly. With a sinister look, he asks the woman if he's wrong. She just smiles without saying a word, stands from her chair, and comments that it's all very exciting but wants to know what's the point of their friendship. As she walks up to Hirkin with two people at her side, she makes it clear that trash coming together is still just a pile of trash. This is. Her real name is Seol Yonki from the Thunder Hunters Guild, and her nickname is Thunder Queen. Hirkin starts laughing and says she's being pretty sadistic. Considering they're the ones getting beaten by the so-called trash, she gets serious and warns him to choose his words more carefully, or she might make him regret it and leave crying. Hirkin grabs his device and asks if she really plans to try making him regret it. He then activates his inventory, equips his mask, his weapon, and finally his full armor. Completely transforming, he points his sword and makes it clear that things like regret are for weaklings like her. She goes crazy with rage and calls him a cocky little bastard, shouting for her minions to eliminate him while Hirkin laughs and wonders if they never learn. He doesn't realize he's been severely impaled by a sword when he notices. He's confused but quickly realizes it was by his own friends, the ones he just saved. It doesn't take long for the system to warn that his HP is dropping fast and that his movements are being restricted because of it. As he collapses to the ground, he wonders what the hell just happened. His friend, upset by what he did, apologizes and explains that everyone there has to put food on the table in real life, and that they have nothing against him. Hirkin wonders why his friends betrayed him like that. Meanwhile, Syl starts laughing hard and, unable to hold back, keeps mocking him, saying he's such a fool for believing in their act of friendship, as if that mattered when money is involved. She then starts walking toward him. As she reaches his fallen body, she calls out to him and makes it clear she's kicking him out of the game. She also emphasizes that if she kills him every time he logs in, she bets he'll eventually quit playing. While Hirkin is lying on the ground, furious, he hears her say that she heard he's a full-time warlord player and that without the game, he's just a useless piece of trash in real life. With a completely mocking expression, she wants to know if he really looks like he's gone back to being just trash. He becomes restless, claws the dirt with his nails, and charges at her, screaming for her to shut the hell up. But in an instant, blood sprays through the air, leaving him in disbelief. She's also surprised, seeing his friends stopping him with several swords stabbed into his body. She thanks them all. With the little strength he has left, Hirkin starts trembling and still insists on knowing why his friends did this, since the guild they had meant everything. His friend, guilt-ridden, simply asks Hirkin to die already. Then he says they were paid a few billion just to eliminate him. Hirkin remains disappointed in his friends, even after everything he did for them. He makes it clear that they once said they'd all be a family, but looking closely at their greedy faces, he realizes it was all just an illusion. Then, several system messages appear, saying that he has died and will receive a 48-hour login restriction penalty. He suddenly wakes up in the real world, terrified, screaming, and thinking he lost everything. The game in question is Warlord, a VR game that took over the world, highly profitable and powered by AI. Jaehyun thinks that game was what made him more than just trash. He remembers when he was playing and met the friend who betrayed him. At the time, he seemed really nice and even invited him to form a guild together, but every time he thinks about it, he gets even more furious because what happened was unforgivable. He grabs his shirt, puts on some slippers and runs through the city, thinking he must find and kill everyone involved. He grabs his phone and calls Dongsu, wondering if he knew everything he went through and if they really think they can just move on alone. But as he runs like crazy, he doesn't notice the red light for him. At that moment, a truck comes speeding and gets dangerously close to hitting him. While he's thinking that if he had known things would end like this, he never would have wasted time caring about anyone. And now, unfortunately, he's about to be hit, unable to dodge. He gets hit and thrown hard to the ground. While falling, he hears his phone say the number he called is unavailable and starts questioning how. Of all things, he ended up getting hit by a truck. He keeps thinking over and over that he can't die there. He also remembers the face of his friend who betrayed him and Sil, who totally screwed him over in the game with the last bit of consciousness. He thinks he must get his revenge at all costs. Then something strange happens, and a system message says he's connecting, says it's identifying the user. Finally, he receives a welcome message from the system. He opens his eyes, confused, and even more confused when he sees a huge monster in front of him, with several dead bodies around, and a large system screen asking him to complete the tutorial, where he must survive against the Minotaur. The Labyrinth Master, he tries to understand what's going on and what the hell kind of tutorial this. Then he hears someone calling him a noob. Looking ahead, he sees two guys shouting at him, telling him to stop spacing out and wake up, and asking if he didn't see the alert, because they need to defeat the Minotaur. Now the creature doesn't waste time, and lets out a huge roar. One of the guys says it's impossible to solo the front pocket, since it looks like they'll need 13 of them to take the monster down. Harkin asks them to wait a second and says he wants to know if the Minotaur is that tutorial boss type, because he remembers it was removed from the game 5 years ago for being too hard. The guy is stunned and wants to know what the hell he's talking about, since the game Warlord was released only 10 months ago. That makes Harkin even more confused about the situation. He starts thinking about the release date, but soon says he understands. Harkin crouches down and picks up the sword. Then he starts walking toward the Minotaur, while the others want to know where he thinks he's going. Ignoring them, Harkin gets ready, and as he charges straight at the boss, the guys wonder if he's crazy. The Minotaur notices his opponent's approach and prepares his powerful attack. However, Harkin manages to dodge it at the last second. Increasing his speed, he lands a fierce blow, completely slicing up the tutorial boss as the Minotaur's pieces fall to the ground. The guys who were there are left speechless, unable to believe what they just witnessed. But they soon exchange sly smiles and call out to Harkin. One of them reaches out and says Harkin is really good, then asks if he wants to join their guild. But Harkin sees this request as a replay of when his old friend first invited him, so he gets super frustrated again. Then he says he just made a decision. While the guys laugh and ask what he decided, they are brutally wiped out by Harkin's frustrated rage, completely drenched in their blood. He says that if he ever trusts anyone again in his new life, he can be considered a damn dog. After returning to the real world, he's startled and wonders where he is, realizing he's in a huge gear store full of people. Then he remembers that 5 years ago, he couldn't afford a VR device and had to use a demo unit. That scares him even more because it means he really went back in time, but he tosses the VR helmet aside and thinks that in that case, there's no time to waste. He runs out full speed, thinking he has 5 years of future knowledge and all the skills he developed, and if he puts them to good use, he's sure he can get his revenge. Without hesitation, he pulls out his credit card and asks the clerk for a gear device. She looks a bit startled by his request but quickly says, "All right," and that shall process the payment. Jaehyun thinks that's great and starts wondering where he should begin. Then he hears someone calling him. It's the clerk, who awkwardly tells him his card doesn't have enough funds to buy the device. He's completely stunned. Then he looks down and remembers it makes sense. No way he'd be playing there if he had money. He starts to panic, wondering what he'll do and if he has to start making money first, but he thinks that would be bad, since he can't waste time on that. Then he's startled by a familiar voice asking why he's hesitating. Looking at the big screen, he sees Syl saying the strong never fear a challenge, because hesitation is a luxury on the battlefield. Then she urges everyone to become a warlord. That's Syl, the Thunder Queen, and the game's top-ranked model Jaehyun watches the game ad on the massive screen, shocked that he just saw the person who took everything from him. He immediately remembers her saying he had gone back to being the same trash as always furious. He turns around and thinks he's in no position to be picky. The afternoon passes, and at his house, a gear device is being installed. The technician tells Jaehyun the setup is done and the gear is ready to use. Jaehyun replies okay and thanks him. Looking at something in his hand, he thinks that was the only way he could afford the device. He had to borrow the money. He remembers when he went there, and the guy wanted to know how much he needed. Jaehyun said 10 million won, and the guy had no problem lending it. While Jaehyun had his hand on the table, the guy reached into his shirt and suddenly stabbed a knife between Jaehyun's fingers. And with a sinister look, he made it very clear that if the protagonist couldn't pay, things would get really difficult. Jaehyun was and that head managed to pay. Remembering this, he thinks it doesn't matter as he starts getting ready to log in. He thinks that even if he has to crawl through hell, as long as he can take down the people who betrayed him, he won't have a problem with it. Then he shouts, "Link start." The system appears, notifying that user identification is in progress. Once identification is confirmed, the system welcomes Herkin back to Warlord. He immediately thinks it's been a while since he was there, and knows it's time for her to show up, but he wonders what was her name again. Then an entity appears and congratulates him on completing the tutorial. She introduces herself as Ariadne, and says she's there to guide him through class selection. Ariadne begins using her power, and explains that he must choose a basic class, and that there are 3 options currently available. The skills he develops in his basic class will determine his advanced class later. A warrior is a fighter who uses close-range weapons in battle, and if he enjoys action-packed combat, this class is perfect. Herkin becomes a little intrigued, thinking about the warrior class since he used it last time, and knows it allows for fast leveling. But he also knows that playing solo with it gets pretty tough later, so he replies that he doesn't want that class. Ariadne describes the priest class, which is a support role that heals and empowers allies with magic. But the protagonist also refuses, and makes it clear he's not going to waste time helping others with that. Ariadne says only one option remains, and hopes the minister's play will be exciting. She then releases her power, which starts enveloping, surprising him with the energy surrounding him. It doesn't take long for the system to announce he's chosen a basic class and will be teleported to his class tower. When he arrives, an old man sitting on a book welcomes him and calls him a young seeker of knowledge. He introduces himself as Golko and says he'll be the guide on the path of magic. He then asks what type of magic the protagonist wishes to learn without hesitation. Herkin answers that he wants to learn dark magic. The room falls silent for a moment. The old man asks if the protagonist really said ancestral magic and apologizes, saying his ears aren't what they used to be. Herkin replies no, and that he said he wants to learn dark magic. Shocked, the old man asks where he even heard of that, since dark magic is powerful but devours the user's soul. The protagonist confidently replies that he knows he's fully aware of it and is willing to bet everything. Golko starts trembling and releases a black spring. Then his expression changes completely and he says he hopes they can dive straight into this. He laughs, saying it's been a while since he saw a young person choose that path. After summoning a book of dark magic in front of the protagonist, he says that if he's ready, he should place his hand on the skill book, but warns again that this path is too treacherous for weak hearts. Without hesitation, Herkin quickly places his hand on the dark book and with a confident look, says to get on with it, and emphasizes that his heart is far from weak. He starts laughing as the dark energy begins surrounding him. As the energy takes hold of him, Golko comments that someone interesting has finally shown up. Herkin remembers a legendary video from his past life, the Necromancer player soloing a boss raid. He concludes that this is exactly the kind of power he needs right now. With that, the system announces that he has become a Reclaimer, his current title Airhead, and that he's gained the skill Bone Shard. Herkin gets excited about the skill and immediately decides to test it, throwing a skull onto the ground. The system notifies that a skeleton warrior, infused with the protagonist's magic, is starting to take form. Herkin just watches his magic take effect, and as soon as the skeleton he summons stands before him, he thinks that this time he's going all in on necromancy. He turns and says it's time to level up, and that he thinks the training dungeon should be just ahead. But then, he looks at the skeleton soldiers he summoned, and sees its head has fallen off. The two of them just stare at each other in silence. After that, a portal opens and someone steps out of it. It's the protagonist. With the system announcing that he has entered the beginner training dungeon, he's quite frustrated because seeing his summoned skeleton lose its head so easily makes him think back to how the summons he saw in his past life weren't that fragile. So he doesn't get it and opens the status window of his summon. He sees his skill, Bone Shard, Proficiency F, Summoned Unit, Level 1 Warrior, Usage, creates a Bone Shard, target, infuse it with mana to summon the skeleton. Herkin wonders if maybe he overdid it a bit. That's why he thinks he needs to level up quickly. Then he hears a sound, and quickly turns to see what it is. Several charcoal wolves are approaching. Herkin gets excited. It's finally time to test his skill. Some say charcoal wolves aren't that strong, but they're very fast, making them perfect to test combat performance. So he casts his Bone Shard skill and commands it to go after the wolves. As soon as the skill hits the ground, the skeleton soldier is summoned. The system then notifies that the skeleton warrior has detected an enemy and assumed a combat stance. The wolves, upon seeing the summoned creature, seem a bit intimidated, but the protagonist simply tells his summon to eliminate them quickly. The skeleton soldier charges at the creatures. Herkin is excited, thinking this looks better than he expected, and that at this rate he'll reach max level fast. But with just one of the wolves' attacks, his skeleton soldier is completely shredded. He's left extremely disappointed by what he just witnessed. The skeleton skull is thrown to his feet, making him furious and confused at the same time. He quickly opens the system screen and asks it to wait because this can't be right, and he wants to check the skills again. Clicking for more information, he realizes he probably forgot to set the mode, so he switches to defense mode 1, but the result is the same. And this time, the wolves are just gnawing on his summon's bones. He switches to mode 3. Special action, but that mode makes the warrior do the dance of enthusiasm. Herkin starts crying, thinking he's completely screwed. He sits down and thinks this is a nightmare he's going through. When he tries to delete his character, the system notifies that character selection is unavailable because newly created accounts can't delete a character for 3 months. Herkin reflects that unfortunately, he can't delete the account, can't change classes, and to make things worse, his loan payments start next month. He starts wondering if he should find another way to fix this. He also questions why nothing is going his way, just when he thought he was finally getting somewhere. Looking at his summon, he knows that idiot doesn't help, so he asks his summon to just stand still. Please. He wonders how the hell that necromancer from his past life endured so many battles. Then he remembers something. He looks at the status window and sees that it's possible to improve in combat. He recalls that when he defeated the charcoal wolves, his summon was watching him the whole time, as if it were learning the movements. Then he smiles, throws his club to the summon, and makes it clear that it's lucky to be his minion because, even if it doesn't seem like it, they used to call him a genius. He trained a whole life and turned them into rankers. And there's only one thing his summon needs to remember about combat. He says this as he charges forward to land a blow, emphasizing that if the summon doesn't dodge, it dies. After landing the punch, he throws his summon far away and immediately tells it to get up again. Then, the same thing, he keeps doing it over and over, landing multiple hits on his summon, always slamming it hard against the wall, until he yells, telling it not to just stand there like an idiot. After getting hit, it's supposed to dodge first, then counterattack when there's an opening. The skeleton soldier wipes its face and prepares for combat again, but this time, it's against the charcoal wolves once more. This time, however, it manages to dodge the wolves' charge and then lands a counterattack right on the jaw. And finally, a powerful spinning strike. With that, it defeats all the charcoal wolves. The skeleton soldier then turns to its master with a grateful look, but the protagonist wants to know what his summon is looking at. He already said there should be no distractions in battle. Still, he smiles and comments that the last strike wasn't bad at all. Then, the system informs that his Bone Shard proficiency has increased multiple times. Herkin smiles and tells his summon did a great job as they leveled up. Sometime later, in the starter village of Castle Figas, the protagonist is walking through the city, hearing people say the legal guild is recruiting new members, and others talking about a forest raid. He thinks his little bone learns fast, but knows that with a few more days of training, it'll be able to solo dungeons. That's why he sees this as the crucial point. First, he needs to reach level 10. Suddenly, someone calls out to him. It's a chubby guy with a dumb face, Wanting to know if the protagonist doesn't know he's supposed to apologize after bumping into someone, Hurricane starts wondering who the hell these third-rate bullies are. While the keeps talking trash, Hurricane doesn't care at all and thinks he doesn't have time for this, and that it might be best to just kill them and move on. The chubby guy gets ready to punch him, while shouting that the protagonist is ignoring him. But then, out of nowhere, a guy appears and blocks the punch. He immediately says the chubby one can't go around punching people. The guy gets nervous, and wants to know who the hell just blocked his attack. Hurricane starts sweating cold, as he remembers who that person is looking at the guy's muscles and strange clothes. He's sure it's Shev the Slayer, the legendary warrior from his past life. The protagonist, afraid of what the chubby guy might do, shouts for him to wait without thinking. But the guy doesn't care, and spits on the ground near the legendary warrior. Then he cracks his knuckles and tells Shev to stay out of it if he doesn't know anything, because it was the protagonist who bumped into him and didn't apologize. So he wants to know if Shev's never heard the saying, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Shev starts laughing, but then releases his terrifying, monstrous aura, which makes the chubby guy crap his pants. The protagonist is really impressed by the power he feels. Shev smiles, but with a terrifying look, and says that in that case, since the guy hit the palm of his hand, should he retaliate? The chubby guy's friend screams, warning him that the man in front of them is Shev the Slayer. Then he says Shev is the leader of the Red Bulls, one of the top 30 guilds, a battle-crazed lunatic known as Shev the Killer Slayer. The chubby guy turns to his friend and asks why someone like that would be there. But Shev grabs his shoulder and wants to know the answer. The chubby guy turns with a terrified face, but then he and his friend run away apologizing. Shev starts laughing and says he's glad everything was resolved peacefully. Then he pats the protagonist on the shoulder and asks if he's okay, saying he shouldn't worry about people like that. But Hurricane quickly turns and brushes Shev's hand off his shoulder, making it clear that next time he doesn't need his help. The Slayer is left confused, not understanding what the hell just happened. Smiling, he thinks that was pretty cold as he quickly walks away. Hurricane thinks that for a moment, he was completely overwhelmed by Shev's power. But he clenches his fists and furious, swears that the next time they meet, he won't be the same person he is now. Sometime later in a dungeon, the protagonist is still thinking about what happened earlier, and how the difference in strength is painfully obvious, but he knows Sil and Shev are at the same level, which means he needs to become just as strong if he wants revenge. While he's thinking about that, a massive black tiger charges toward him. However, without doing anything, his skeleton soldier easily defeats the creature coming his way. And with no mercy, the skeleton finishes off the black tiger. The system announces that the skeleton warrior has killed a black tiger and leveled up. While his summon looks pleased, Hurricane takes a deep breath and wonders if it really took him 3 days to reach level 10, thinking that it took longer than expected. That leaves his summon a bit upset. But after a while, the system finally congratulates the protagonist for reaching level 10. It says, monsters will no longer appear in the training dungeon. His beginner mark has been removed, and his rewards will be processed. Hurricane gets excited. He finally made it. The watch is an essential device with several function stats, quests, map, inventory, and messages. The protagonist thinks it's been a while since he used it. He quickly opens his status window and sees that he's level 10. His class is Necromancer with 3 points in strength, 3 in stamina, 5 in intelligence, and 5 in magic. He thinks it's a shame that his stats, but then the system prompts him to allocate his available stat points. He reviews his stats to decide what would best support his goals. He knows this is just the first stat distribution, so he needs to be careful as a Necromancer. The obvious choice would be to increase intelligence or magic, but he decides this time will be different and puts all his points into strength. With that, the protagonist's strength stat increases by 50 points, bringing his total strength to 53. His summon looks extremely disappointed, seeing it upset. Hurricane asks what the problem is, then he knocks on its skull and makes it clear he hasn't given up on necromancy. He's doing this to train it. He explains that increasing intelligence or magic right now won't make much difference, but investing in strength will allow him to teach it every move he mastered at his peak. He's literally betting his life on his summon's learning. The skeleton soldier gets emotional at its master's words, which only makes Hurricane more irritated, telling it to just focus on training while he takes care of the rest. He then says there's another way to make up for the other stats. The next day, he goes to the Monster Hunting Association at the Castle Figus branch. The mission distributor grabs an item and shouts to everyone there that fresh missions just arrived. While the crowd starts fighting to grab missions first, the protagonist calmly walks through them, thinking that missions this time of year are usually bad. But the guys are still hyped, so he figures they're all noobs. When he gets to the counter with the old man who gives out missions, he says he wants one and asks to see the list. The old man agrees but warns him that all that's left are the ones no one wants, either too hard or with lousy rewards. As Hurricane scans the available missions, he thinks most of them are really boring, but he notices one that catches his attention. After picking it up, he thinks he's found his ace. It's the Bima Mountain Cave, a basic mission with low-level monsters. The old man finds it strange and asks if he's sure he wants that one, since the reward is just 10 gold coins. He replies yes, and the system notifies that the quest has been updated. Then he thinks that at first it seems like just any quest, but if completed before level 15, it'll grant him an ultra-rare title, Rising Star. The protagonist reflects on how people often question the value of a simple title, but he knows that titles increase a player's stats. For example, a scatterbrain mage who gets mocked by a wolf might just be a low-level alchemist with poor attributes, but once he obtains the Rising Star title, it increases attributes by percentage. In other words, this is his first step toward becoming a broken character. So he turns around, and after leaving the quest association, he thinks it's time to gear up. Sometime later, on Mount Bima, Hurricane isn't looking too pleased. He realizes he equipped himself with something ridiculous. He immediately starts complaining, wondering what the hell he just did, since after spending all his money on equipment for his summon, he only had enough left to afford cheap stuff. And now he looks like a fool, but he knows he just needs to finish the quest quickly and buy real clothes. So he runs off to complete the quest right away. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, a bloodied hand rises. It's a man lying wounded among the plants, calling for help until he gets dragged back, and sometime later, a warrior arrives at Mount Bima and declares that the grand adventure of the Great Multi is about to begin. He feels proud for being level 11, and thinks he might even become a top ranker in record time. Then he hears someone screaming for help, asking for someone to save their lost friend. The warrior rushes over and asks what happened. The priest says a monster started attacking them out of nowhere, but he barely escaped, and to make it worse, they ran out of healing potions. The warrior starts looking through his device and says he thinks he has some potions and tells them to hang in there. The priest starts crying and thanks the warrior, but it was a total setup. Another guy was ready to strike the warrior while he was off guard. After taking the hit, the bleeding warrior collapses and wonders what just happened. The priest thanks him again and, along with his friends, makes it clear to the fallen warrior that they'll make good use of his items. The warrior is crushed when he realizes he was tricked by such pathetic people. The priest drives his sword into the warrior, finishing him off, and says it was his own fault for falling into such lame trap. The system announces that player multi has been eliminated and removed from the game. It also says the player's watch has dropped and is now up for grabs by the bandits. The bearded warrior laughs and says nothing beats messing with noobs. With several watches on his arm, the priest turns around with a sinister look and tells his friends to go find the next sucker. They are members of the Ralph family, part of the infamous player-killer gang. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, the protagonist's summon is ready to battle some fierce creatures that charge at it. Hurricane snaps his fingers and switches his summon to attack mode, making it rush at the creatures without hesitation, and, with little effort, it completely obliterates them. The system reports that the skeleton warrior killed an ancient wolf and gained 375 experience after another kill, 366 more, and, finally, another 379. As Hurricane watches his summon handle the creatures, he thinks that now that he bought it a sword, it can defeat an entire pack of ancient wolves on its own. He also knows he made the right choice by prioritizing gear for the skeleton. Pleased, watching his creation grow stronger, he thinks that real gamers focus on performance, not appearance. The skeleton soldier looks back, sees his proud master, and immediately wonders why he's looking at him like that. However, Hurricane turns and replies that it doesn't matter if his summon is done dealing with the ancient wolves, then they should just leave already, because he needs to level up and get rid of the horrible outfit he's wearing. Little Bone runs after his master, but something suddenly comes flying, and an arrow hits the summoned skull dead on. This startles the protagonist, who wants to know where the hell the arrow came from. Someone approaches, apologizing. It's the same cheating players from earlier. The priest says he's really sorry, and explains that he saw the protagonist's creature from afar and thought it was a monster. They keep insisting they're sorry. Hurkan was about to say it was fine, but then he notices the blood-stained watches on the priest's arm, as well as the warrior's sword. He quickly concludes they're scum, so he starts acting, smiling and saying it's fine, but asks if they happen to have a mana potion. The priest apologizes again, and says unfortunately they don't, but offers to help him level up since his mana will naturally recover with each level up. The protagonist keeps pretending he doesn't suspect anything, and says that sounds good. The priest insists it was their fault, so they'd be happy to help. Looking at the monsters ahead, he calls his group to battle. He explains that they'll weaken the monsters, and the protagonist can deliver the finishing blow as they move in. The priest quietly asks if everyone knows the plan. They all respond yes. The warrior whispers that Hell take aggro first, then the mage says Hell cast an attack buff second, and finally, they'll accidentally let the monster loose toward the clueless protagonist. That way, the poor idiot will panic when he sees the beast charging at him. So they all just wait for it to happen. However, they're quickly left speechless, unable to believe what they're seeing. The protagonist's summon easily defeats the creature. Hurkan then says he's fine and asks them to just keep going. They start wondering what kind of summon he's using, and maybe his level is higher than they thought in that case. They decide to start sending multiple waves at once against him. Then, while he's distracted, the warrior sneaks up behind him as he's about to strike. He thinks all he needs to do is defeat the summoner. But when he attacks, Hurkan easily dodges it, leaving the warrior confused as hell. His target just dodged an attack from a blind spot. With no time to react, he gets hit by a brutal blow from the protagonist. The priest panics and shouts, wanting to know what the hell is going on. Hurkan snaps his fingers and calls for his summon, Little Bone, who immediately joins him and charges at the thugs alongside his master. They scream in fear, begging them to wait. But with no chance to defend themselves, both are attacked by the coordinated strike of master and summon after their bodies crash to the ground. Hurkan makes it clear he knows their kind all too well as he walks toward them. He says they're the type who earn people's trust just to stab them in the back and take their loot. But he admits that if he still thought like before, he might have fallen for it. The blood-covered priest starts screaming in desperation, begging the protagonist to wait a second and just take all his items and go. But sadly, Hurkan makes it clear it's too late. He no longer trusts anyone. He says that, then mercilessly finishes off his opponent. At that moment, the system announces that player Ralph has been eliminated and that the 8 watches he carried have been dropped. After seeing how many watches Ralph had, the protagonist becomes furious, thinking the guy really was a scumbag. But something about it also makes him happy. He knows Hell make good use of the drops. First, he's gonna get himself some proper clothes. But as he turns around, he sees his summon kicking the already defeated warrior, so he calls out to him and asks if he wants any of the drops lying around. Then the protagonist extends his hand and starts healing the wound caused by the arrow his summon took. It doesn't take long for Little Bone to be fully healed. He then raises his sword and strikes a heroic pose. Hurkan looks at his excited summon and says, "It really looks like he's happy." The protagonist also comments that appearance doesn't matter in the game. But while striking a ridiculous pose, he emphasizes that what truly matters is being beautiful on the inside. As his summon stares in shock at its master's absurd pose, Hurkan smiles and says the priest's dropped watches were truly a jackpot. There's less than a 1 chance that when someone sells another player's watch, the inventory will drop random items like rare gear with stat bonuses. For example, the goblin's black pants he equipped, which grant 5 extra points in mana and 5 in intelligence. Also the sword of ancient essence, which gives 10 more points in mana, plus the skill books, from which he obtained the book of demonic curse. And lastly, the most important, lots of gold. Hurkan picks up a mask from the inventory and thinks that thanks to the fools he defeated, this was faster than expected. He then concludes that Hell soon start recording his gameplay and knows Hell need the right style for that. But after thinking about it, he remembers something that makes him uneasy. He starts recalling his past life, how he once asked the friend who betrayed him to imagine their whole guild wearing traditional Haihu masks. At the time, he was so excited, saying the next day they'd rename the guild to Haihu Mask. Remembering this leaves him a bit down, and he even considers completely changing his style. However, he begins doing something to the mask, altering its form entirely, and thinks he refuses to let anyone take what's his ever again. Furious, He tells himself he'll prove he was right and this will be the beginning. So as soon as he equips his sinister mask, he runs off and calls for his summon to follow. Sometime later, in a different dungeon, the protagonist and Little Bones step through a portal, and the system announces that he has entered the Bima Mountain Cave dungeon. Hurricane examines some markings on the rocks and thinks he clearly remembers that in this dungeon, there are blue werewolves. He also knows they're tough monsters, but with his new gear, he believes he'll be fine and might even clear the dungeon in 10 minutes. So he calls his summon to go all in. A few hours later, Hurricane is in disbelief and yells, asking why there are no monsters around. He starts thinking this is driving him crazy, because he knows if someone had already cleared the dungeon, the system would have sent a message. Then he sees his summon doing something near the rocks, and when he turns, he notices something that grabs his attention, so he heads over to where his summon is and sees something strange on the rocks. Suddenly, a massive dark energy begins to swell. The system announces that the protagonist has discovered an instance dungeon and asks if he wants to enter. He falls to the ground, startled, and says that must be why no monsters were spawning, because instance dungeons are random dungeons that appear inside another dungeon, and when they do, the normal dungeon shuts down until the instanced one is completed. He also knows these dungeons are much harder, but give double the rewards. He starts wondering if it might be a trap, because he knows once someone enters an instance dungeon, they can't leave until it's completed or they die. So he gets up and tells his summon that logically he should just walk away, because if he dies, he won't be able to play for 2 days. It would make much more sense to just farm easy missions, but he knows that's not what matters right now. With that, the system confirms he's entered after stepping through the. He says that as long as he doesn't die, he should be fine. But soon, a bright light covers his face, and as he tries to look around, he wonders if the place he's in is an ancient arena, also feeling an intense atmosphere. Then he gets startled by a powerful tremor, which was caused by a massive, sinister werewolf standing before him. It's a corrupted werewolf of unknown level. The creature doesn't hesitate and immediately launches an attack at the protagonist, who is still trying to understand what's happening, and, unable to defend himself, is struck and thrown hard against the wall. Little Bones sees his master in trouble and immediately gets furious, assuming a battle stance. But Hurricane laughs and says this is perfect. He keeps laughing and says his luck is insane, since a corrupted monster appeared. He's convinced this must be material for a main quest. He then calls for his summon and makes it clear that if they can't defeat the werewolf, they can say goodbye to dinner. With that, he charges at the creature. Little Bone gets ready too. Then, he lays down his sword for his master to step on and leap toward the corrupted werewolf. The creature lets out a loud howl, but Hurricane uses his skill Curse Release, and his sword is instantly infused with the energy of the demonic curse. The werewolf has no idea what this mere human is doing, but in the blink of an eye, it struck and has one of its arms sliced off. The werewolf starts screaming in pain as the system notifies that the protagonist's skill is active, and the target stats have been reduced by 10 as the werewolf howls in agony. Hurricane looks at his sword and reflects on the demonic curse, thinking that for a first try, it wasn't bad at all. However, the werewolf starts releasing a bloody aura and, now extremely enraged, charges straight at the protagonist. At that moment, a system message appears, warning that the corrupted werewolf is enraged and all of its status effects have been nullified. Hurricane simply prepares for the worst, thinking he was already expecting at least this much from a dungeon boss. Then he smiles and says he was saving this for later, but right now seems like the perfect time to test it. He activates his inventory, and a dark energy begins to surge, completely engulfing him, until an explosion occurs, unleashing all the energy, and Hurricane appears fully equipped in sinister battle armor, laughing and asking where he left off. Activating a slot is one of Warlord's unique game features. When activated, the slot channels pure energy from the world of Warlord, enhancing attributes and shaping the player's body. As for the form, it's completely unpredictable as it varies for each player, which is why most players usually call it Supreme Mode. Hurricane calls out the corrupted werewolf to bring it on and show what it's got. The beast becomes furious and lets out a powerful roar. Then it charges at the protagonist. But as it tries to strike, Hurricane dodges without much trouble. He keeps avoiding multiple lunges from the werewolf. Then he jumps back to gain some time, but the creature doesn't care, and unleashes another powerful attack. While evading the werewolf strike, the protagonist thinks that his opponent is definitely a boss, given its speed and power. He starts to wonder how many of the beast's attacks he could withstand. The werewolf comes charging again, showing several possible openings. Noticing one of them, Hurricane, with his sword radiating energy, lands a powerful slash on the werewolf, making it scream in pain. He then smiles and says that this is why he finds the game so fun, but he's startled by a tremor. As the werewolf is still not defeated and is attacking again, Hurricane takes a deep breath and realizes his opponent is still enraged and that he can't afford to relax in battle. While airborne and the werewolf about to grab him with its claws, the protagonist looks to the side, wondering if his summon is just hiding something. Then, Little Bone jumps onto the werewolf and manages to cut off its other arm. Hurricane immediately shouts to his summon, saying it's time for the attack they practiced. The werewolf is left confused and helpless as it's hit by their combo attack. The attack was so fast that they managed to land several simultaneous strikes, slicing the enemy completely, and the system announces that they have defeated the corrupted werewolf. Hurricane then deactivates his slot and comments that it wasn't bad at all. Next, the mission card the protagonist selected starts spinning and glowing brightly. It reveals that the Mount Bima Cave mission, Defeat the Monsters, has been completed and the protagonist received 10 gold coins as a reward. The system also announces that the skeleton warrior defeated a high-level monster and the skill bone shard has been upgraded to rank E. Additionally, the protagonist also obtained the werewolf's skull and hide. While his summon celebrates, Hurricane notes that it seems like instant dungeons really do have the best drops. The system continues by announcing that the protagonist obtained the Corrupted Tracker's necklace, a unique chronicle item. It boosts all class-related attributes, plus 18 to all stats. It's bound to the user, non-transferable, with only one requirement: the user must have the Corrupted Tracker title. Hurricane is quite surprised by this drop. He knows he can't sell it, but it's still a higher class item than any standard one. He gets even more surprised as he also earns 3 new titles. Rising Star, which grants plus 3 to intelligence and mana. Hurricane knew he was going to get that one. The next title is Hero Challenger, granting plus 3 to stamina. Hurricane comments that he even got a group title since he soloed an instant dungeon. And finally, the Corrupted Tracker title. He's quite surprised and wonders if this is the introduction title for the first chapter of the main quest. The Corrupted Count. Hurricane knows that the main quest is the foundation of the Warlord game world, being a crucial storyline. And because the rewards are insanely good, every player wants in, no matter what. It's the core content of Warlord for players. While trembling from all the rewards he received, he thinks that even in his past life he barely made it to chapter 4. He gets excited and thinks that what he got wasn't luck, but a jackpot, so he yells to log out immediately. Back in real life, he sees a breaking news live stream with a player announcing that his guild, Hydra, has officially entered the final phase of the Corrupted Count scenario, and that they aim to complete it within 3 months. Jaehyun pauses the live stream and feels really down, because what he thought was a jackpot in game turns out to be nothing in the end. Then he gets furious and starts banging his head on the desk. Since that player and his guild are already in the final phase, he considers that maybe he has no choice but to stay out and wait for the next chapter. But then he gets an idea. He goes back to his computer, thinking that maybe this is actually the perfect opportunity, since he knows the entire world is currently focused on the Corrupted Count, and the first main quest of Warlord is about to be completed, so he wonders if anything would change if he posted his video about the Corrupted Count, thinking it might go viral. Jaehyun thinks it was a great idea to have everything recorded, so he knows he needs to edit and upload it to Tube as fast as possible. However, he also knows that editing is the key, and he can't just leave that to anyone, meaning there's only one person for the job. The legendary editor from his past life. The filmmaker, Ramani. She sees the protagonist's request and wonders who this person named could be. While checking the request, she questions what a level 15 could even accomplish. Maybe the starting cave, guessing it's just some rich newbie making a flashy video for social media, until something catches her eye and she ends up genuinely shocked, remembering a certain person. Then she gets really excited upon realizing who it is. This is Ramani, a freelance video editor, and her in-game nickname is Hell's Mouth. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a woman is watching some news on her tablet. One of her employees rushes in, asking if she called. She says a new video about the Corrupted Count has just been uploaded. She hands the tablet to her employee and says it's quite interesting, since a level 15 defeated a corrupted werewolf solo. The furried guy laughs and says her team also saw him, but made it clear that corrupted werewolves are low level, so they didn't think it was worth tracking. She smiles and says she liked it. Then she asks her employee to bring the person from the video to her. This is Xiaolian Che, heiress of the Thunder Corporation, the biggest business conglomerate, and her name in Warlord is none other than Thunder Queen Sil. The next day, the protagonist is quite surprised looking at something on his phone. Seeing the video he posted the day before, he notices it already has many views. To be exact, over 6,000 views. He feels awkward, knowing it took him months to reach that many views in his past life. Looking at the message Remini sent, asking if he saw the view count, he realizes something else has changed. She contacted him first. He knows that normally she never reaches out first, as she's supposedly a very mysterious person. Then she asks when he'll send the next video. Xiaolian lies back in his pod, takes a deep breath and says he's wondering that too, since he has no idea what to do for the next video, and there's no way he's gonna find another monster like that werewolf with the ear again. So he thinks it's better to start making videos only once he reaches level 50. That said, he turns on the VR device, begins logging into the game, and thinks he needs to strike while the iron's hot. Meanwhile, Shev the Slayer is watching the protagonist's video. He comments that no matter how many times he watches it, the protagonist's moves always seem impressive. However, he becomes intrigued by something while watching the video, and wonders if he doesn't already know him from somewhere, as he seems very familiar. Then a beautiful woman arrives. This is Yell, affiliated with the Red Bulls. Shev tells her he's talking about Herkin, the one with the Haho mask, and that he's one of the trending topics right now. She wants to know if her friend is watching the video again, saying it would be strange if he weren't familiar. When Shev watches it all the time, the blonde guy takes a deep breath and, all excited, shouts that the game makes you feel like you're moving in real life. So when people play for the first time, they tend to be shy with their movements, but that's not the case for the protagonist. Then he asks if she saw how the protagonist trained his summon, since it's on another level compared to other necromancers. Yell starts getting annoyed with her friend's chatter and yells at him to shut up. Then she starts pushing him and tells him that if he's gonna keep talking nonsense, he should go back inside, because they're going live in 5 minutes. Shev smiles, winks, and says he really likes her. Crossing her arms and taking a deep breath, she says that if he really does, then he'd better do well in the upcoming livestream. She then says that over 200,000 people bought tickets just to see him, the leader of the Red Bulls and the man ranked 9th in Warlord, the Slayer Shev. With that, as the livestream begins, a dungeon portal appears, and both he and the members of his guild get ready to enter. Shev smiles and, pointing his blade, tells everyone to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, at the affiliated Raiders Association of Castle Figus, Herkin is very disappointed and starts slamming the table because there are no missions available. He wonders how there could be absolutely no good mission, so he considers taking a break from making videos for now. The old mission man approaches and says he knew the protagonist was the adventurer who cleared the Mount Bima cave dungeon. Herkin remembers the old man. He introduces himself as Hotan, and wants to know if the protagonist has a moment. After going to a more private place, the old man says he's heard everything and knows the protagonist even encountered a mutant in the Mount Bima cave. Herkin is puzzled, thinking he doesn't remember any such quest, so he says he just saw a werewolf with strange eyes. Hotan turns and says that's what he thought, as he believes there's a strong chance the monster the protagonist faced had been exposed to the power of the. Herkin finds this odd and wonders if the old man has lost his mind, but Hotan emphasizes that he doesn't know exactly who it is, but it's certain that the protagonist's power is causing monsters to go mad, and several are becoming victims. That's precisely why the Raiders Association has placed a bounty, but before he can finish speaking, his arm is suddenly grabbed. Herkin, eyes gleaming, says he'd like to help capture this wicked bastard. He says this thinking it might be a hidden quest and that he needs it as soon as possible. The old man tries to explain that he thinks it's too early for the protagonist to take this on, but Herkin doesn't care and makes it clear everything will be fine. Hotan gets a little embarrassed and says that, in that case, hell give the protagonist a chance, depending on how well he does then. He says there's someone named Ahimber in Castle Bangsu, east of Castle Figus, which surprises Herkin when he hears the name. The old man goes on to say that this person will be able to guide him, and that he'll also write a letter of recommendation. Thus, the quest, Ahimber's Teachings, is created with the objective of finding Ahimber and showing Hotan's letter of recommendation, with a skill book as the reward. Herkin leaves the Raiders Association and shouts in joy. Then he wonders if this is really happening and if, by any chance, he actually got a quest to become Ahimber's student, knowing that this person is one of the 7 disciples of the Grand Mage Boken, since all mages want to meet him because he provides rarer skill books. In other words, he's a very important NPC in the game. So he runs off happily, thinking he probably got this opportunity because the Rising Star title combined with the main quest of the Corrupted Count, and that if things go well, he figures he won't need to worry about video material anymore. Until he stops and realizes he almost forgot something he needed to do first. Then he heads into a forest, uses his bone fragment skill and summons it. After Little Bone appears, he realizes he hasn't checked the rewards from the last battle. So he decides to start by using the werewolf skull. He didn't sell. The system asks if the protagonist wants to use the werewolf skull to enhance the skeleton warrior. He says yes. The system then informs that the skeleton warrior gained werewolf traits and received 2 extra points in toughness. Herkin knows it's now time for the corrupted tracker's necklace. So he wastes no time and equips it. The system announces that the effects of the corrupted tracker's necklace have been applied to him, giving him 18 extra points in all stats and boosting all class-related attributes. Herkin knows everything is going well, since his preparations are complete. Next, he grabs 2 more bone fragments and throws them on the ground, summoning 2 more skeleton warriors, which leaves his primary summon confused. Herkin tells Little Bone that from now on there will be 3 of them and they'll fight as a unit, so they'd better get along with each other. As the protagonist sets out with his 2 new summons, wondering what kind of monster might be in the area, Little Bone goes crazy, thinking he was supposed to be the master's only pupil. Doesn't take long before they encounter a level 25 forest bear. It starts attacking repeatedly, forcing the protagonist to dodge them all, until the wild bear finds an opening and charges. Herkin panics, thinking he won't be able to dodge in time, but then he smiles, snaps his fingers, and says he grabbed the bear's aggro. With that, one of his summons leaps at the enraged bear, but unfortunately the summon takes a heavy hit and is thrown back violently, several bones shattered. Herkin gets angry and questions if the summon really thought such a predictable attack would work, since it needs to strike from the bear's blind spot, so he tells the summon to try again. It leaps at the beast once more, but again, gets hit and slammed into the ground. Herkin loses it and starts yelling, cursing his summon. Then he points out he already said to attack from the blind spot, and wants to know why the other summon did the exact same thing. However, the third summon walks forward and strikes a ridiculous pose, which actually makes its master smile, thinking maybe this one will do better. The final summon jumps at the bear, sword ready to strike, but the bear, without much effort, just swats it with its massive paw and knocks its head off. This leaves the protagonist even more furious and frustrated with his summons. So after some time, and after defeating the bear himself, he wonders if his summons even have brains, because frankly he doubts it. Then he tells them to put their heads back on. While they do that, he tells them to listen carefully and explains that when monsters are attacked, they obviously turn toward the direction of the attack. Then he draws a diagram on the ground and says that's why his summons need to go for the monster's blind spots. He then asks what would happen if they charged from where the monster is looking. The summons just make faces like they didn't understand anything, which makes him even angrier, and he tells them to forget it. Even so, he thinks it's great that the skills rank has increased, and that he can now summon 3 skeletons at once, thanks to the effects of the corrupted tracker's necklace. But he knows the problem is that his summons can't work together. They just repeat what was told to one of them before, but since they haven't learned to fight as a team, they don't know how to do it. So he finds himself in a dilemma, knowing that his summons cost triple the mana, but are even worse than before. Then he gets up and says whatever, since he already reached level 20 like he wanted, and it also seems like he won't be able to make combat videos for a while. So he turns around and tells his summons to get up too, because they're going to train all the way to Castle Bangsu. He thought he'd leave the fighting to his summons while he sat back and relaxed like a necromancer should, but it seems he won't be able to avoid the front lines. So he concludes that he's totally screwed. After a while, he returns to the Raiders Association branch at Castle Bangsu. Inside, it's full of players. Then, a guy walks out of a room, and everyone immediately gets excited to see that a certain player has come out. They desperately want to know what quest that player accepted, and that's when the protagonist enters, thinking everyone there is like a bunch of hyenas. He covers his face and concludes that clearly you can find people like this anywhere, knowing they don't even try their best on their own and just want to leech off others. Then he hears someone call him a bald guy, wants to know if the protagonist has a good quest, suggesting they could do it together, but Hirkin couldn't care less, and tells the guy to fuck off. As he walks up the stairs, he reflects that he can't let anyone find out he's doing a Himbra's quest. At the top of the stairs, he hands over Hotan's letter of recommendation. The player inspects it, confirms everything, and politely asks Hirkin to head to the second floor. Meanwhile, people keep acting like parasites and desperately try to get in, claiming they're in a party with Hirkin. As he walks, he wonders what kind of reward a Himbri might give him, thinking it must be good, since it's a hidden quest, and that hell try to build a long-term relationship with him. As soon as he walks through the door, he politely asks to come in, but is shocked to see tons of books and a huge mess. A person among the clutter wants to know who the protagonist is, since he doesn't remember scheduling anything. This is the NPC a Himbri. Hirkin hands over the letter of recommendation, introduces himself, and says he's there on Hotan, the old man's recommendation. The NPC looks at the letter and comments that the protagonist seems to be a novice dark mage, and therefore assumes he must be pretty skilled for his level. Hirkin laughs and says it was just luck, but he thinks it doesn't matter as long as he gets the reward. A Himbri says he understands and proceeds to give the protagonist his rewards. Hirkin gets excited after receiving the Bone Armor skill book and the Helm of Madness book. Then he thanks a Himbri for giving him 2 super rare books. A Himbri says that's it for business and asks the protagonist to leave the system, then announces that the Ahimbra's teachings quest has been completed. He tells Hirkin to be careful on the way back. Hirkin finds it odd and asks the NPC to wait, wondering why the quest ended so quickly, and if he doesn't have another one to give. He knows he didn't come all this way just to get a couple of skills, so he starts yelling for a Himbri, saying he'll do anything. The NPC then grabs the protagonist's hand and asks if he really will do anything. Hirkin replies yes. With a very suspicious expression, a Himbri thanks him. With that, Hirkin receives the quest The Nest's Egg, which requires him to retrieve the egg from the nest. And to make things worse, there's no reward. This leaves Hirkin in shock, thinking the NPC tricked him. Meanwhile, a knight walks through the city, causing people nearby to grow visibly nervous. Then they begin to wonder if the knight's gear isn't some kind of very expensive type. He continues walking and heads to the affiliated Raiders Association. Then he wonders if that's where the player Haho Mask might be. Meanwhile, the protagonist, after leaving a Himbra's room, feels very disappointed, thinking it's really possible to get scammed by an NPC. So he walks off, thinking he expected to receive a quest related to the main storyline, but now he wants to know what the hell this egg quest is, especially since it has no reward. Still very frustrated, he keeps questioning if he really needs to do it. Then, out of nowhere, a strange guy appears right in front of him, asking about the quest. Soon, several other players surround the protagonist, all trying to find out what mission he got. He panics, thinking he forgot those guys were there, and wonders what to do now. Maybe he should just kill them all. Then, out of nowhere, the knight appears, releasing his intense power and blasting the players away. He asks the protagonist if he has a moment for a talk, saying he'd like to speak somewhere quiet. Hirkin finds it strange, and wonders who the hell this guy is who just showed up. So he tells the knight to fuck off, but the knight gets really close to the protagonist's face and whispers, calling him Haho Mask, and asking him to cooperate. That really scares Hirkin after hearing himself called by that name. So they go to an alley in the city. The knight says he's sorry for causing trouble. Then he taps his watch and says he felt like they couldn't talk properly out there after unequipping his helmet. Hirkin is confused, thinking that based on the player's gear, he must be at least a ranker, but he doesn't recognize him. So he wonders who the player could be, and how he knows the name Haho Mask. The knight asks if the protagonist really is Haho Mask. Hirkin starts getting nervous and thinks that in situations like this, the best thing to do is pretend he knows nothing, so he asks who this Haho Mask is that the knight keeps talking about, saying he just followed him there for a chat, but really wants to know who the hell Haho Mask is. The knight, a bit frustrated, wants to know if the protagonist didn't just receive a quest from an NPC named Himbra. Hirkin steps up to the player and demands to know who he is, and why he should share any information, especially since he dragged him there. Still pretending he knows nothing, he flips the player off and asks if he's looking for a fight. But he thinks to himself that he has absolutely no clue who this guy is. All he knows is that he needs to keep pretending. The player stays silent for a moment, but suddenly reaches out his hand and says he clearly made a mistake and apologizes. Hyrcan breathes a sigh of relief, shakes the player's hand, and says it's fine. Then he turns around to leave, making it clear hell let it go just this once. The player just watches the protagonist walk away. However, another player had been hiding there using a skill, and tells his friend that he doesn't think the protagonist is the one they're looking for. The knight points out one thing for sure: the guy isn't skilled, because if he had been playing Warlord for a while, he wouldn't have carelessly exposed his wrist with the watch like that. The other player then asks if they really need to keep monitoring the NPC Ahimbri, since the Corrupted Count quest is almost finished, and even if someone found out about it now, he wonders what they could really do. The knight says that the Ness Egg quest the protagonist received is the main quest, which is why he thinks they shouldn't take unnecessary risks. So the mage says hell return to his position. The knight agrees and says goodbye. However, someone had been watching that conversation. Hyrcan, who quickly realizes there were actually two players there. He thinks they're definitely part of an organization since they're working together. But he also believes that if they were from a normal guild, they would have made an offer after revealing who they were. With that, he concludes that those guys definitely aren't ordinary players since they were testing him like that. But he remains curious, wondering who the hell those players were. The next day, Hyrcan is still puzzled about what happened, thinking there must be something more to the Ness Egg quest he received. He figures they probably saw his video, and already knew the Heiho Mask would receive a Himbris quest, especially since they let him go so easily. That's why he thinks they don't care who Heiho Mask actually is, so he's stuck in a unsure what's going on with the quest he got, but knowing that if he continues it as is, he'll likely run into them again, and if he wants to avoid that, he won't even be able to post videos for a while. He wonders why those damned lunatics keep ruining his life, especially since just dealing with Solyen alone is already too much. Meanwhile, Solyen has just logged out of the game, and her secretary Park Suji appears, commenting that she did a great job. She then hands her lady a water bottle and asks how things went with the guild entrance exam. Solyen takes the bottle and says they were all trash. She also wants to know how they can all be so useless, and if there are any updates about the Heiho Mask she mentioned. Suji hesitates a bit, but says he seems to have joined another guild since he hasn't responded yet, which makes Solyen furious, demanding to know if that's true. Terrified, Suji says she doesn't think so and will investigate again. Solyen tells her not to come back until she's sure. While changing clothes, she asks what the chairman said. Suji replies that he hasn't said anything yet. Solyen smiles and explains that if he's staying quiet, it means Warlord is doing very well. Then, after getting dressed, she emphasizes that he tried to arrange a marriage by force when she told him about playing the game. While Suji is stunned by her boss figure, Solyen tells her to gather a new batch of candidates and report to her the next morning. Suji is startled and asks if she really wants to hear about that the very next day, as it's quite sudden, but Solyen doesn't care and leaves the room, ignoring her secretary. Suji thinks her boss has a really nasty personality. Later, in a dungeon, Hyrcan comments that it's been a while since he was there and that he barely remembers the lizard swamp. He figures that since Ahimbri is currently at Castle Bangsu, the quest must be somewhere around this region, especially because it involves finding an egg, so it's likely from some kind of bird, reptile, or insect. Filtering through places he can access at his current level, the lizard swamp was the only option. He then calls one of his summons and says the monsters here are high level, so he'll probably need to use the skill enhancement he received, referring to the Helm of Madness. He knows he has to draw a mark and cast the proper spell. So he activates the helm and his summon begins to change. Its gaze now filled with a bloody energy, it quickly starts releasing a powerful aura that leaves the protagonist stunned. He gets really excited seeing his summon transforming into something incredible. He says they need to test it first, so he tells the summon to attack him, but he forgets the note in the skill that says there's a chance the summon might lose sanity. One of them takes a deep breath, eyes full of bloodlust, and charges at its master, who is now terrified, but Hurricane lands a solid punch to the summon's skull, launching it high into the air. As the skull crashes back to the ground, he demands to know how the summon dares to scream. Then, he decides to review the skill more closely to check for a bug, but finds nothing. He figures maybe he got hit by his own skill somehow, but doesn't notice something emerging from the swamp behind him. A level 30 lizard man appears, ready to attack. Hurricane turns and says that, apparently, the test subjects arrived at just the right time. With that, he activates his skill again, and the system notifies that when the Helm of Madness is active, it increases the summon's attributes. And currently, the boost rate is 12x. Hurricane also activates Bone Armor, equipping his summon with armor, but for now, the only available piece is the chest plate. With that, all his summons are ready for battle, which makes the lizardmen a bit nervous. So Hurricane orders his summons to wipe out the monsters. They unleash a series of attacks, forcing the lizardmen into full defense. One of them takes advantage of a distracted enemy, appears behind it, and strikes with a powerful, merciless slash. It doesn't take long for the system to announce that the skeleton warriors killed 3 lizardmen and earned 864 experience points, and that the protagonist leveled up twice. Hurricane watches his summons and bursts into laughter, full of excitement. Then he tells his summons that for the next week, they'll be hunting monsters while searching for the egg, and if that's not the right region for the quest, they'll move elsewhere. While calling his summons to head out, someone watches him from afar. It's a bold woman. She plays coy, thinking about how she'll introduce herself. She keeps thinking how beautiful she is, then admits to herself that's not what she meant to think, but knows it's true, and there's nothing she can do, since everyone likes her no matter what. That's why life has always been easy for her. When she pretends she's in trouble, her slaves always come to help. But as soon as she takes a step, she slips in the mud and falls face first into a puddle. Furious, she thinks about how much she hates this place. She then remembers that one of her slaves brought her there to help her level up, but in the end he died quickly, and now she's stuck there. Watching the protagonist from a distance, she knows the monsters there are too strong, and the terrain is difficult. Then, as she stares more closely at the protagonist, she gets an idea. Maybe she just found herself a new slave. He hears a strange sound, and when he looks back, he sees Ilya stumbling before collapsing on the ground, asking for help. She puts on a pitiful face and says she hurt her legs because of the monsters, but inside, she's thinking the fool in front of her will fall for her act, and won't resist helping a damsel in distress. But the protagonist doesn't care at all and simply turns away, continuing on his path. That leaves her completely stunned, wondering why the hell he acted like that. As she shouts for help, Hurricane just thinks another lunatic has shown up. Ilya bites her lip, absolutely furious, wondering how he dares ignore her. Hurricane continues his journey, fighting several monsters along the way, and while he gets bored watching his summons handle everything by themselves, he notices that the same woman is still following him. He realizes he's been ignoring her to avoid wasting time, but she just keeps following. So he starts remembering the faces of the players who tried to trick him a few days earlier, getting angry, thinking that if they're in the game, they should at least play properly. He concludes it's better to deal with this now. So he finally turns around and asks the woman what she wants. She approaches and says she dropped her sword in one of the swamps while hunting, and asks if he could help find it. Hurricane makes it clear that when he finds the sword, she'd better disappear from his sight. She gets excited and starts thanking him non-stop, saying she won't forget his help. But internally, she thinks she just fooled another idiot. After walking around the area, they eventually find the sword she mentioned. Ilya thanks the protagonist again. He says it's fine, and reminds her not to forget the promise she made to disappear once she got the sword. He takes a deep breath, and orders his summons to go retrieve the sword. They quickly head over. While laughing, she thanks him once more. But he knows that necromancers are nothing without their summons. So she takes advantage of the fact that the protagonist is distracted and attacks him. Just as she's about to succeed, Hurricane quickly turns around and tells her she's really slow. Then, while she's still surprised and trying to figure out what just happened, he grabs her clothes and throws her high into the air, making her fall straight into the swamp. She emerges from the water and starts cursing him. Furious, she demands to know if he really thinks he'll get away with something like that, because her bodyguards will find him and destroy him. Hurricane starts laughing and tells her to look behind her. She turns around, wondering what's back there, and sees several lizard men. While Ilya tries to defend herself as best she can, Hurricane makes it clear that she still has a long way to go before she can trick him. He also points out that he could see her intentions from the very beginning. He then thinks to himself that he's been fooled too many times and can't afford to let it happen again. So he turns and says she's already wasted enough of his time, then calls his summons to leave. However, he gets frustrated when he sees them mimicking the same flirty behavior they saw from the woman. Hirkin gets angry and orders them to stop learning weird things or hell eliminate them completely. Then a system message pops up informing that the player Ilya has been eliminated. The protagonist gets excited and says he wasn't expecting to earn points for that. Since he didn't eliminate her himself, then he remembers her yelling that her bodyguards would come after him and figures they probably don't even exist. He'd even bet someone like her doesn't have anything like that. However, a group is watching the protagonist through a recording device and they are furious. Sometime later, still in the swamp dungeon, someone is injured and has a sword pointed at them. Hirkin, while leaving his sword stuck in the player, tells the protagonist to screw off and calls him an enemy of Lady Ilya. Hirkin says he's going to ask a question, wanting to know why the player is going so far for her, since it's not like he gained anything from it. And that's why he really wants to know if he thinks she'll date him if he avenges her. The player suddenly starts smiling, which confuses the protagonist. Then the player laughs maniacally and yells that it's because he loves her. So Hirkin eliminates him mercilessly and thinks the whole thing is a joke. Then he starts thinking about the girl from earlier who tried to deceive him, which makes him remember her. He never thought what she said about having bodyguards would turn out to be true, but knows that because of it, he's been running into crazy bums like them every day. He gets excited, thinking he's pretty eager due to not finding any missions, especially now that there's a bunch of shameless people trying to get him. He then wonders if he should find that woman and kill her again, but concludes it's better not to, as it might cause even more problems with that. The system informs him that he obtained another unowned watch, as well as 5,000 gold coins, goblin leather boots, and the rare quality promise necklace. Hirkin wonders if the promise necklace he just picked up isn't one of those super rare items that could be sold for 800,001. He gets excited and shouts that love is great, thanking the idiots while thinking he'll finally have a fancy dinner. Suddenly, a guy appears shouting that the protagonist is right in front of him. Hirkin turns around excitedly, saying that the guy who killed Ilya is here. However, he finds himself face to face with several warriors, so he starts running away from them, as he didn't expect there to be so many. While running, he wonders how many there are and if it's really possible for so many people to be obsessed with that woman. Then he decides to stop running and summons his minions. One of the players comments that those are the summon skeletons they had heard about, and says hell let his friend handle it like they agreed. He takes a deep breath and uses his love power skill, easily cutting through all the summons, while the protagonist screams that such a skill doesn't even exist. Then he sees a system notification that his skeleton was destroyed, so he thinks they seem to be a higher level than him, and since there are so many, he doesn't think he can fight them head on, so he boosts his speed even more, leaving them behind, and swears that once he levels up, he'll find and eliminate them. After running for a while, Hirkin stops to catch his breath. He soon thinks that it's hard to shake players off because his level is lower, and for now, he just needs to keep moving. Then he's surprised when he feels something strange in the air. He turns around and wonders where he is, knowing that the place is very different from the rest. He realizes he doesn't remember a place like this in the lizard swamp, and that he's been in the area for days but has never seen this kind of black swamp. After thinking a bit more, he concludes it must be what he suspects. Meanwhile, the players are searching for the protagonist, wondering where he went. Then the chubby one yells that he might be ahead, since he sees a skeleton, but what they're actually seeing are the protagonist's summons dancing like they're in a club on top of something strange. They're stunned by the sight. The chubby one gets furious, curses the protagonist, and says that it wasn't enough to hurt Lady Ilya. Now he dares to insult them like this. Without thinking twice, he charges straight at the... But at that moment, a huge creature emerges from the swamp and grabs the chubby guy, pulling him into its massive mouth. His friends are paralyzed with fear because of the enormous creature. This is the level 40 lizard dragon, the boss of the lizard swamp, which easily devours the chubby guy. Hirkin just hides, watching the players deal with the boss. He then thinks he never imagined the nest would be the lizard dragon's nest, since he knows it's a boss with huge defense, HP, and attack, requiring a group of 20 level 40 players just to barely defeat it. He also reflects that, from what he heard, the lizard dragon raid was completed some time ago, and normally this boss shouldn't even be here. However, he considers that if someone with a quest enters the area like his quest to take the egg from the nest, the monster will respawn. In other words, if the lizard dragon is here, this must be the location of Ahimbri's quest. That makes him even more curious, wondering if Ahimbri really sent him there to defeat that thing and take the egg back. Even knowing he's only a level 20 player, he gets furious, thinking that NPC is a real scumbag, but he also knows that, luckily, he managed to gather some good comrades, so he figures it should be fine. One of Ilya's love slaves yells that the lizard dragon is too much and they'd better retreat, but Hyrcan shows up and says they can't do that. He then uses his bone fragment skill and summons his skeleton warriors. The players, seeing the protagonist's summons, comment that they're surrounded. One of them, shouting that it's fine and they just need to push through, ends up getting struck by the lizard dragon without realizing it and is launched into the air. With that, the protagonist takes advantage of their distraction and runs off as he sprints at full speed. Hyrcan thanks them and says he'll never forget the sacrifice they made. He then thinks that now that the boss is occupied, it can only mean one thing, so he heads straight to the lizard's nest to steal the egg. Knowing it should be empty after jumping into the nest, he gets excited thinking all he has to do is grab the egg and get out. But he ends up shocked as he doesn't see the egg anywhere. So he starts searching like a madman until he finally finds the egg and stares at it. Puzzled, he thinks he found something really suspicious and, judging by its appearance, wonders if it doesn't look more like a rock than an egg. Then he gets spooked when the system informs him that his skeleton warrior was destroyed. He turns around and assumes the lizard dragon must be returning after detecting an intruder. It doesn't take long before the boss returns to the nest. Furious, the protagonist tries to hide and thinks he's totally screwed. He also knows that now that the boss is back, he won't be able to search the nest any further. But looking at the thing that looks like an egg, he figures that if that's the case, he has no choice but to take it, even if it isn't really an egg. After returning to where the players were fighting the boss, he sees a chaotic scene with several bodies. Hurricane approaches one of them laughing, and while grabbing the player's watch, he says that Warlord is a really interesting game and that there are so many crazies because everyone has too much freedom. The player gets furious and curses at him, but Hurricane stabs his sword near the player's face, and as the guy gets scared, the protagonist tells him to listen carefully to what he's about to say. He explains that he was just playing around until now, but that he has a lot to lose in this game. So he makes it clear that next time they meet, they won't get off so easy, and that this is a warning to them and that woman too. After saying that, he turns and runs off at full speed. After walking a bit, he thinks that he swears. If those players keep bothering him even after his warning, it'll be all-out war. Then he thinks it's time to make some extra cash with everything he got in the swamp dungeon. So he posts on the game forum that he just found a lizard dragon in the lizard swamp and wants to sell the exact location for 100,001. After returning to where Ahimbri is, he places what he thinks is an egg on the table and awkwardly tells Ahimbri that he brought what he asked for. He then hopes it really is the right item since he doesn't want to search the whole map again. The NPC observes it closely, which makes the protagonist anxious, until Ahimbri says that this is the item he was looking for and thanks the protagonist. He gets excited, thinking that in the end, he managed to bring the correct item. Ahimbri comments that he was faster than expected, and thought someone like him would take much longer. Hyrcan gets nervous, wondering if he knew that and still gave him this mission. What kind of NPC is this? Still, he says he did his best and wants to know if he'll get another mission. Ahimbri asks if the protagonist knows what the item is, because when they investigated the area near where the mutant monsters were, this thing was found. That's why he temporarily named the item, which looks like an egg. The Stone of Corruption. Hyrcan is shocked, realizing that must be the reason those guys were after him. Since he knows the Stone of Corruption is an important origin item related to the main quest, he figures they just wanted to make sure no one else got the item that could impact the main quest's progression. But at the time, he thought he had been scammed when he got that quest, so he never expected it to be part of the main story. Ahimbri apologizes and says he knew the mission would be too hard for the protagonist. But since they're facing an unknown and powerful being, he needed to test Hyrcan's willpower. He then gets serious and asks if Hyrcan is ready. To fight against corruption, the protagonist clenches his fists tightly, thinking he has plenty of willpower, and if this is part of the main quest, then it's his golden opportunity. So he yells that he'll devote his body and soul to it, But a Himbri replies, "Not right now," which leaves the protagonist completely confused. So he asks the NPC to be clearer. He explains that Herkin must have seen how strong the monsters are, and therefore doesn't think he should give such a mission to a rookie. The protagonist is stunned, wondering if his level is really too low to continue the mission. But suddenly, the NPC changes his expression and tells the protagonist that if he asks the great mage Himbri to please accept him as a disciple, he might be willing to help and train him. After that, the protagonist leaves a Himbris room without saying a single word. Not long after, the system informs him that he completed the Nest Egg quest, obtained the title of a Himbris disciple, and that the quest, A Himbris Teachings Part 2, has begun, which requires him to reach level 40 before meeting a Himbri again. The reward will be a skill book of the corrupted tracker ring. Then he remembers the pathetic scene. He had to act out exactly what the NPC told him to do, so he gets furious, thinking a Himbri really is a con artist. Meanwhile, in some dungeon, a fierce monster has been completely defeated. They shout to end the battle, and for anyone needing healing to head to the healers. One of the players tells his captain that their guild finally did something big. He agrees and asks the warrior to tell everyone to regroup after resting. He then runs over to another player, thanks him, and says he was even stronger than expected. That player is the knight who went after the protagonist. He replies that it was no problem at all, and that it was all thanks to the other players who supported him so well. The guild captain insists that wasn't the case and says that if it had been just them, at least 5 members would have died. That's why he believes it was thanks to him that they completed the raid with no casualties. He also admits he had doubts when he heard there were helpers who accepted money to assist in boss raids, and says he's really glad he hired him. Then he takes a pouch of coins and says it's all they have to offer. The knight notices that this isn't the promised payment. The captain awkwardly admits he knows that but says it's separate from the original deal. However, the knight gets serious and says he won't accept it as he doesn't like breaking the rules. This leaves the guild captain embarrassed and very surprised, and he apologizes, thinking the knight was just helping out for the money. While the captain wonders why a ranker would take on such a low-level raid, the knight walks off, saying he's going to collect all the items from the nest as promised. The captain yells to warn him that there probably isn't anything of value in the nest. Meanwhile, the player thinks he got really lucky since he never imagined he'd get a chance like this to obtain the Stone of Corruption. He remembers being worried when he heard the lizard dragon had respawned, thinking that Heiho Mask might already be on the quest. But since the lizard dragon was still alive, he assumes the protagonist must have failed. So he jumps into the nest and thinks that defeating a boss isn't something you do with mechanics alone. He gets excited, knowing that all he has to do now is grab the Stone of Corruption and stop Heiho Mask from completing the quest. But then he's disappointed to realize the Stone of Corruption isn't there. He starts trembling with rage and shouts, cursing the protagonist. Meanwhile, the protagonist is logged out, staring intently at his phone. He takes a deep breath and says it's time, since during all those tough days, he kept telling himself that if he endured a bit longer, things would get better. But he gets nervous and decides that ends now. He builds up confidence and says he's going to do it. He's going to order steak. He grabs his phone, starts jumping around like crazy, and says he was trying to save on gas and food just in case. But now that he's completed the main quest, he figures it's okay to treat himself to a juicy steak, especially since he earned some extra money. So he thinks it's a fitting reward, and time to convert it into real money. As soon as he does, he sees his massive balance in the account and gets excited, saying it's finally time for steak. But then he watches several deductions hit his account, debt payments, utility bills, and rent. His balance drops to $8,561, leaving him stunned. Since that's not even enough to buy instant noodles, he starts pounding the floor and wonders why he worked so hard and is still broke. Then he gets a message from Remini, asking if he's still alive and if he quit Tube for good. He picks up his phone and thinks he forgot to update Remini about his situation and that he can't make videos anymore because some lunatics are after him. But then he gets nervous and wonders if he really needs to be so cautious when he's practically starving. What did he even do wrong? He's just an innocent player enjoying the game. Frustrated, he gets up and decides he doesn't care anymore. He'll do whatever he wants. So he logs back into the game and goes to a creepy place that looks like a graveyard. The system notifies that he's entered the field of the forest of the dead. As he walks, he tells his summons that no matter how many times he comes here, it's always scary. He figures this is probably the best place for him to grind some experience. And the creepy atmosphere is also great for attracting views on his videos. With that, he turns around and calls his summons to hunt. But first, he says they've got a new teammate now and he's in charge of strategy from now on. He tells them to get along. His new summon is a skeleton mage, a skill that the con artist Ahimber gave him. He knows that the more his mastery improves, the more advanced the effects they'll be able to use. So he concludes it's a great skill but also one that consumes a lot of mana. Then, looking ahead, he sees a hand emerging from the ground and says that's their next target. Several skeletons begin rising from the ground as well, all at level 33. This leaves his summons confused, as the enemies look just like them. Hyrcan looks back and wants to know what his summons are doing, since they're supposed to be out there hunting monsters, but they're clearly terrified of fighting copies of themselves still. The protagonist couldn't care less, and makes it clear that his summons will realize once the fight begins that undead monsters have different traits than normal ones. However, he sees his summons hiding in fear, and immediately demands to know what the hell they're doing. Frustrated, he snaps his fingers and tells them to stop wasting time. They have a lot of work to do. Boney wastes no time and charges forward. Striking a skeleton with pity, he then watches the enemy stand still for a moment. But it soon keeps moving even after being hit, leaving Boney confused. Hyrcan comments that, yes, that's right, normal attacks don't work, so he pulls a warhammer from his inventory, one that adds 35 strength, and lands a simple hit on the skeleton. Shattering it completely, he follows up with a blow to its skull, sending it flying, and thinks it was a perfect home run. He turns around and asks his summons if they saw what he just did. They just have to smash the skull. But what he sees instead is all of his summons holding their heads in fear of him. Terrified that he might do the same to them, Hyrcan then says the goal is to hunt 100 skeletons in 100 minutes, because he's recording a timed attack video. With a sinister smile, he makes it very clear that if they fail, he won't let them leave. That instantly makes them dash off at full speed to hunt. After some time, the system reports that the protagonist has eliminated several skeletons and leveled up. He compliments his summons on doing a great job and thinks he expected them to take longer to get used to a weapon they'd never used before, but in the end, they're doing better than expected. Because of that, he believes the video will be a success, but he'll need to talk to Remini first. That's when he senses a strange presence, and a massive level 35 skeleton warrior appears right in front of him. Hyrcan gets nervous, realizing this is a rare monster that spawns randomly. He also knows there's a chance it might come back in a bovine form, so he runs at full speed with his summons toward the boss, thinking that he's finally going to get steak. As he charges, he wonders what he should eat first, grilled or roasted, but then he sees the skeleton warrior swinging a massive axe, and has to leap back quickly, or he would have been wiped out by the monster's powerful blow. After retreating to his summons, he thinks that was terrifying. He nearly died without even reacting. Thankfully, he aimed at the creature's arm, which only enraged it more, and it quickly follows up with another strike. But Hyrcan anticipates it, and together with his summons, strikes the skeleton warrior in the pelvis, slamming it to the ground. He then checks if his summons are okay while saying it was easier than expected. He doesn't notice the skeleton warrior charging at him again just before it hits him. He comments that the creature is quite impatient. Then he yells out that there's still one last attack left from one of his summons. The skeleton mage begins channeling fire magic and launches it, hitting the warrior dead on, and setting its bones ablaze. The system announces that the protagonist has slain a skeleton warrior and earned a large amount of experience. Hyrcan takes a deep breath, thinking that was a close one. Looking at the flaming remains of the creature, he concludes he should get at least 10,000 views on that video. But he's still hungry and decides he's definitely grilling that steak. At that moment, the system alerts that the field boss has detected the death of one of the protagonist's subordinates, which leaves Hyrcan confused. The system then continues warning that the field boss has found intruders, and finally, that the field boss is awakening. A massive magic circle appears right next to them, then its head begins to emerge, followed by its body, until a colossal creature fully materializes before Hyrcan and his summons. He's left speechless, unable to believe what he's seeing. The level 40 golden skeleton boss has appeared. He knows that the golden skeleton is the Forest of the Dead's boss, and the first mage class boss, a powerful one known as the Rookie Killer. He also recalls that the condition to make it appear was defeating several skeletons, though he hadn't considered that at the time. He thinks there's no way he can beat it, but if he does, it'll be a huge jackpot. Then he gets an idea of how to pull it off. If he buffs his skeletons, maybe there's a chance. So he calls his summons into battle, only to notice they vanished. The system then informs him that his summons were dispelled due to lack of mana, which leaves him stunned. He starts to panic. He's all alone in this fight. He doesn't realize it's normal since he had summoned all 4 and even made the mage cast all those spells. So there's no way he'd still have mana left. Facing the colossal creature, he knows he has no choice. He grabs his watch and says it's time to warm up his body for the first time in a long while. He activates his slot and equips his battle armor. With that, he faces the boss and dares it to bring it on without hesitation. He takes the initiative and charges forward. The golden skeleton quickly begins channeling its skill, growing stronger, and once it's ready, it fires at the protagonist, who has to dodge the powerful attacks. Hyrkin knows that a single hit would kill him, and yet the boss is launching multiple attacks. It's no wonder it's called the Rookie Killer. While the golden skeleton continues attacking, Hyrkin realizes he has no chance of winning if he allows it to keep casting spells freely. He jumps and just before striking, thinks that all he needs to do is stop it from casting. He delivers a powerful blow to one of the golden skeleton's palms, managing to delay its attack. Hyrkin notices that the boss hands are tied to its spells, so he figures he just needs to destroy all of them. At that moment, the golden skeleton begins to react strangely, and the system alerts that the field boss is staring directly at the protagonist, which confuses him. Then the system warns that the boss is seen through him and is evaluating the protagonist's skill level after making several gestures with its hands. The golden skeleton releases an intense wave of dark, negative energy. Hyrkin gets scared, wondering what the hell is happening. In a blink, he's bombarded by the boss' dark energy while running from the attacks. He tries to understand what's going on until he sees he won't be able to dodge one of them. At the last second, he leaps to the side, causing the attack to crash into the ground. But the impact launches him violently across the area. Lying on the ground, he catches his breath and questions the boss' insane attack pattern. He doesn't remember it being like this. He wonders if he's misremembering, or if the golden skeleton had hidden patterns, or maybe it just got rebalanced in a patch like the Minotaur in the tutorial mission. That thought discourages him, since unfortunately he can't recall clearly after all. It's been years since he last hunted a golden skeleton. Still, he grabs his weapon and thinks how frustrating this is, having no skeletons to summon, and not even remembering the boss' full attack pattern. Looking up at the colossal creature in front of him, he wonders how he's going to defeat it. The boss quickly launches another attack, forcing the protagonist to dodge again. He keeps doing this with every attack the golden skeleton makes. As he gets a little closer to the boss, he thinks he can actually dodge the attacks as long as he knows their trajectory. Unfortunately, he also knows that this leaves him with no time to counterattack, so he reflects that he needs to find a blind spot as fast as possible. That's when he gets startled. The boss grabs him with one of its arms. It pulls him in and lets out a tremendous roar right in his face. Hyrkin thinks he's completely screwed watching the creature channeling an attack right in front of him. He wonders how many attack patterns this thing has. But he smiles and says he has a trump card too. He uses his demonic curse skill to inflict a debuff on the boss. The system announces that the target stats will be reduced by 13. With that, the protagonist breaks free from the boss grip and charges at it. He comments that he didn't know how he'd get an opening, but the boss ended up giving him one. Then he channels power into his fist and delivers a powerful punch straight to the golden skeleton's face. A huge explosion follows from the impact. The skeleton's bones begin cracking and breaking at once, which gets Hyrkin completely hyped. The golden skeleton starts to fade away. Not long after, the system informs the protagonist that he has defeated the golden skeleton, earned lots of experience points, received a hefty sum of gold coins, obtained the title Skeleton Slayer, and leveled up. He breathes in relief as he deactivates his slot. He thinks that was a close one, certain he would have failed if it had lasted 10 more minutes. Then he pulls up his status screen and sees that he's currently at level 36 with 9 titles. His stats show 109 strength, 35 stamina, 101 intelligence, and 141 mana. He gets excited. Knowing he's reached level 36, however, he also realizes that things will get dangerous from here. Even though 141 mana is a decent number considering he invested the bare minimum in that stat, he knows it's still not enough so far. He's been pushing forward thanks to his titles and level ups. But now that he has more skills to use, it's just not sufficient after all. He increased his strength for his skeleton warriors, but what's the point if the skeleton warriors vanish? He hangs his head, thinking he's already earned all the mana-related titles he can at this point, and wants new gear, but unfortunately, he has no money for that. Then, out of nowhere, he smiles and says he doesn't care and doesn't even know anymore. He skips off saying that, for now, he'll send the video to Remini and focus on reaching level 40, and that later, for sure, he's gonna eat beef ramen. Sometime later, after he sends the video he recorded in the Forest of Monsters dungeon to his editor, she watches it, she pauses it, takes a deep breath, and punches her teddy bear hard. Furious, she keeps beating the stuffed animal, and asks if the protagonist is actually insane. But suddenly, her personality shifts and she gets all giddy, jumping around the room and saying that Herkin managed to defeat a boss stronger than him, without taking a single hit, and he did it with no practice at all, proving he's truly talented. She sits down in her chair, relieved, and says the video is so good it barely needs any editing, and shall soon send him the final version. Then she starts wondering what title to use for the video, thinking of something cool. She suddenly has an idea, and excitedly declares that she'll title it the Solo Emperor. Later, in the game, at the Bangsu Castle branch of the Adventurers Association, Herkin arrives, saying to Ahimri that he's back, stronger just like he asked. He notices the protagonist all dirty, and asks what happened and why he looks like a beggar. Herkin laughs and just tells the NPC to hand over the reward already. The NPC agrees and says he'll give the promised reward. The system then announces that the protagonist has completed the quest, Ahimra's Teachings Part 2, and has received the skill book, Osteology. He's very impressed by the skill book. Knowing it's a very rare necromancer ability not found on the market, the skill increases the stats of all summoned skeletons by 5, reduces the mana cost to summon and maintain them by 10, and also allows summoning 1 additional skeleton. But what he needed most was precisely that mana cost reduction, so he starts thanking the NPC frantically. Ahimri also shows Herkin that he obtained the corrupted tracker ring, and that he should use the corrupted stone he brought to harness its power. The corrupted tracker ring is unique in the game's history, and grants 2 bonus points to class-specific stats, and 9 points to all attributes. When used together with the corrupted tracker necklace, all attributes are boosted by 21 more points. Herkin is drooling with happiness because he knows the corrupted tracker ring is that rare ring given only to the first players to complete the main storyline. He jumps to grab the ring and thanks the NPC, but Ahimri closes his hand and says, on second thought, he's not sure he can just hand it over. He turns away, leaving the protagonist confused. Then, Ahimri turns back, laughing, and tells him that if he wants the ring, he should come and take it if he can. Herkin laughs and says, all right, without hesitation. He activates his slot, puts on his battle armor, and charges at the NPC full force. Sometime later, outside the Scavengers Association, Herkin has managed to get the ring. However, he's exhausted, wondering what got into that crazy old man. He would have killed him if he weren't an NPC, but in the end, he got the ring and the next quest. Ahimri had told him that had lost contact with an agent named Miggy, and that he thought the protagonist should visit Suryu Castle. Remembering that, he decides to let it slide for now. However, he knows that the Suryu Castle area is high level, so he figures he should level up more on the way. Then, he sees several messages on his watch. It's Remini with urgent news, saying she just posted the golden skeleton video on Tube and thinks he should take a look. The protagonist opens the video and immediately sees that it has over 2 million views, along with many comments praising him and asking for more, many of including donations to the channel. He's blown away, wondering what the hell is happening. He drops to the ground in disbelief and starts counting how many zeros are in his account. Soon, he starts thinking about what to eat. Tomahawk, ribeye, filet mignon, sirloin, so many delicious things. He starts drooling, thinking he can now eat anything tasty he wants. Then, he wonders about the jackpot he just hit. He knew the reactions would be good, but not this good. As he's thinking that he needs to log off soon, his watch beeps with a new message. It's a huge donation, and someone says they've been sending him messages. The message is from the recruitment leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, saying they've tried reaching out several times, but hadn't gotten a reply, so they're leaving a comment here. He says that the Thunder Hunters Guild would like to officially recruit him, and asks if he could spare some time to discuss it with them. Herkin gets furious. He knows that the Thunder Hunters is Chai Sol Yun's guild. the woman who kicked him out of the game in his previous life. He then remembers how persistent they were back then, and apparently they're still doing the same thing. Furious, he flips off the message and says he wouldn't join the Thunder Hunters even if his life depended on it. But after thinking a bit more, he feels like he said this before, so he recalls his past life when he was furious and saying it was annoying as hell. And he wants to know why Chai Sol-yun is being so persistent after being rejected so many times, especially since she was already in a guild. One of his friends at the time commented that he was pretty lucky, since the Thunder Hunters were one of the best guilds even among the top 30, and that the guild leader was the daughter of a rich family, so if he joined, he'd definitely get a six-figure salary. His other friend added that it made sense they were after someone like Hirkin. Then he smiled and explained that it was because the protagonist was really good at the game, and in all the raid videos from his guild, every single comment was just about him. He finished by saying that, honestly, Hirkin was way too good for them. Hirkin took a deep breath and quickly asked them to stop, making it clear he didn't care about the six-figure salary because he didn't want to join the Thunder Hunters, and the money would come once their own guild became the strongest. Plus, he preferred to keep playing with his current guild. His friend gave a fake little laugh and said he was right, so, after remembering all that, he feels even more frustrated now, but he knows they don't need to betray him again over it. He starts slapping his own face and thinks it's not time to get drunk on the money. He's got a lot of work to do, so he pulls out the skeleton fragments and throws them as soon as he summons them all. He makes it clear to his minions that they know he was the one who did everything in the Golden Skeleton raid and that they did nothing. He explains that they're going to start training again because they need to move more efficiently and can't repeat what happened last time, so he asks if they're up for it, but he ends up seeing his old friends in his summons faces, then quickly realizes they're not them, and that makes him happy, thinking this time will be different. He calls his summons to become the strongest, then says their next destination is Suryu Castle and asks if they should train along the way. All his summons nod, suggesting yes. With that, Hirkin summons his weapon and says the training will be simple. They're just gonna run all the way there, and if any of them fall behind, they'll get punished. That makes them take off running at full speed, afraid of getting hit. And so, they head for Suryu Castle. Meanwhile, Syl is deep in thought. A mage approaches and asks what she's thinking about. She's standing over several defeated monsters. The mage informs her that it's almost time for the meeting. This is Hatch from the Thunder Hunters Guild. Syl jumps down from where she was and quickly asks how the progress is going on the Corrupted Count mission. Hatch says they haven't made any progress yet, and still haven't found any clue for the next quest. Syl gets furious and says she can't believe they let the Hydra Guild grab the main quest before them. Hatch tries to argue, saying she thinks they'll find it soon, since they're going to a meeting with the leaders of all 30 top guilds. Syl emphasizes that there's no way a meeting with those losers will be useful. Even so, Hatch asks the guildmaster to be careful. As she walks away, guys, here's a quick recap of the latest chapters to keep you updated. The protagonist's tube video was a hit, and he made a lot of money overnight. He was also close to losing control, but thanks to the person responsible for everything he went through, the flames of his revenge were reignited. So he decided to walk the path of a hungry beast. The first thing he did was go to the loan shark he had borrowed money from, and as soon as he got there, he threw down his money bag and made it clear he would pay the full debt, principal and interest in cash, which surprised the loan shark. Jae-hyun, as he's called in real life, after handing over the money, asked if everything was okay. Next, the protagonist bought rare skill books, which made him quite happy. However, once back in the game, he knew he was broke again with his account balance at 0. Surrounded by his summons, Hyukin lamented that he thought he was ready for this, but admitted that seeing his bank account still hurt. He quickly decided to forget about it and learn the new skills he bought. He wasted no time and learned them. The system then informed him he had acquired the skin grafting skill, a level F mastery passive that increases defense by attaching monster remains to his skin. If he takes too much damage, the material must be replaced. He decided to test it right away, and the system asked if he wanted to use the skeleton warrior's horns to enhance it. He said yes, and the system notified that he had gained the essence of a skeleton warrior. And 5 defense points. Curious, he equipped a sword and tested it by attacking himself. He was pleased, and commented that he was perfectly fine and that it was much better than expected since nothing happened to him. Then he moved on to the next skill. The system notified him he had acquired the Curse of Sloth skill, allowing him to cast a curse that slows the target's movements. The larger, faster, and stronger the target, the more mana it consumes and the shorter the duration. Hirkin found it interesting, looked to the side, saw his summons, and tested the skill on them, concluding it could be useful in battle. Finally, he opened his last book. The system then informed him he had obtained the golem summoning skill. Hirkin knew this was the hardest skill to get, and the one he wanted most. He tested it immediately, which even surprised his summons. He smiled, and seeing his summoned golem, said he could finally summon it. Then he shouted that a necromancer is nothing without golems, and judging by the size of his new summon, he knew it was more reliable than any of the tanks there. He smiled and snapped his fingers, activating his copy mode, passive, on the golem. He then created a bond with the summon. Knowing it had a copy mode that could sync its movements with his by combining the golem's strength with his own movements, he believed it could be ridiculously effective. However, the golem just stood still, shocking the summons and driving the protagonist crazy. Wondering why it didn't work, he questioned whether it was a bug, but then the golem mimicked his earlier movement, leaving everyone speechless. Hirkin wondered if this was faster than his other summons could react, then laughed and asked himself what he should do next. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone mentioned they thought everyone had arrived and asked if they could start the meeting. This was Nurgle, leader of the Ares Guild, who thanked everyone for coming despite being busy. Shev the Slayer, leader of the Red Bulls Guild, laughed and said he recognized a few familiar faces there. Berg, the leader of the Big Smile Guild, just takes a deep breath, while Syl, the leader of the Thunderhunters Guild, remains silent. Berg wants to know if 29 were invited, and only 4 showed up. Shev laughs and says more people came than he expected, since they're talking about the top 30 guilds. Nurgle points out that this was really sudden, then explains that normally the top 30 warlord guilds are fiercely competing, and it's very rare to have a meeting like this one. However, he becomes serious and reveals that the Hydra Guild discovered the identity of the corrupted Count and is planning a final raid in a month. Shev starts laughing and says that's insane, knowing none of the other guilds even came close, and if that's true, then Hydra pulled something off. But he's quickly interrupted by someone slamming the table. It's Berg, furious, yelling that it's all over if they let Hydra get the corrupted Count, since they'll end up monopolizing all future main quests, sponsors, ads, and content. Syl tells Berg to shut up and, releasing her power, says that if he's scared, he should just sit quietly and not bother anyone. Berg doesn't like that at all, quickly equips his claws and asks if she wants to fight. Shev asks them to calm down, saying they're not here to fight. Nurgle agrees with the blonde and makes it clear that a fight between them would only benefit Hydra. Then, Nurgle emphasizes that this is exactly why he's proposing an anti-Hydra alliance. The 4 guilds present will agree not to fight until the corrupted Count missions are finished, and will share all info about him. He then asks if anyone opposes his idea. Shev says he's not a big fan of alliance schemes, but thinks there's no other way. Berg makes it clear that if they don't stop Hydra, they're screwed. Nurgle concludes the meeting, but Syl, without saying a word, clearly didn't like any of it. Later, outside the game, someone's taking a shower. It's her, thinking the meeting was humiliating since they couldn't even defeat the Chapter 1 boss alone, and had to join forces with other guilds, but she knows there's nothing she can do for now because if Hydra gets the corrupted Count first, they're done. So, for now, she knows it's time to lay low and wait for the next chance. She picks up her phone and tells someone to order all guild members to keep an eye on Hydra and report any strange activity, because the corrupted Count will be theirs no matter what. Meanwhile, inside the game at the Tsuryu Castle branch of the Adventurers Association, Hirkin is surprised, wanting to know what's going on. A guy says he already asked him to go to the Barbara Forest. He explains that's where Agent Miggy disappeared, and that the protagonist should search the area for traces. Hirkin says he knows the Barbara Forest is full of level 70 monsters, a dangerous area, and that he could die instantly if he goes there now. The adventurer sighs and says that's exactly why he's asking him. A disciple of Ahimbri, he then makes it clear that if the protagonist refuses, he'll lose his status as a corruption tracker, which scares him even more after leaving the association. Hirkin sits by a fountain, thinking, and concludes he's totally screwed. He opens his quest window, and sees he has to find the missing Agent Miggy, who's investigating the corrupted stones, and continue the mission with a reward of 500 gold coins and additional rewards. The penalty is losing the Corrupted Tracker title. If the quest isn't completed in time, he has 29 days, 9 hours, and 33 minutes. Hyrcan gets furious, knowing that if he loses his Corrupted Tracker status, he'll be kicked from the main quest. Scared, he realizes that accepting all those high-level quests backfired, since he normally wouldn't be able to complete them, but somehow managed in advance to the next stage. And to make things worse, he now accepted a quest meant for or higher, so he finds himself at a crossroads, wondering what to do, knowing he can't just give up on the main quest like that. But at the same time, he knows he can't go to the Babaru Forest either. That's when he overhears a player asking a mage if she thinks the Hydra Guild will complete the main quest, because if they do, he believes they'll definitely rise above the other guilds. The mage emphasizes that the rest of the top 30 guilds haven't even managed to start the main quest. The player then asks what'll happen to the other main quests if the corrupted count is defeated, which scares Hyrcan quite a bit. But he quickly smiles, looks at his watch, and realizes that maybe he doesn't need to go to the Babaru Forest after all. Meanwhile, someone is observing a huge castle from afar, reporting that nothing special has happened, and that his and his friend's mission is finally ending, since having to sit and watch the castle for hours every day was starting to drive him crazy. He asks if his friend agrees. After getting no reply, he calls out to him, his friend being Nadal, 8th in command of Hydra. The guy wants to know what the reward for defeating the corrupted count will be, and if Hydra will definitely become the best guild. Nadal clearly says not to get ahead of themselves. He adds that it's not over yet, as their mission is to secretly monitor the corrupted count's castle. He explains they can't let their guard down or leak info, because true professionals know how to stay calm. Then, out of nowhere, a player runs up shouting that he's found Nadal, which makes him furious, asking what the hell is going on. The player is Kims, rank 3 of the Red Bull Guild, who smiles and says it's been a while. Nadal, shaking with rage, demands to know what a Red Bull member is doing there. Kim says the boss on that mountain is high level, so he came to defeat it. He then asks if that's what they're there for. Nadal looks at his friend, knowing they can't reveal their real mission, and replies that yes, that's exactly why. But Kims walks up and asks why he looks like he's dying to take a dump, which enrages Nadal even more, yelling that it's not true. Kims turns and says he's leaving, and tells Nadal to feel free to go relieve himself, making him even crazier with rage, screaming that he already said that's not it. So Kims walks away while Nadal yells at him to come back. After walking a bit, Kims taps his watch and informs someone that the Ethan command of Hydra is there, and that it looks like the lead they got was true. Shev and Yell are listening as Kims passes on the information. The leader says it's unbelievable that the anonymous lead about the corrupted count's location was accurate. Yell says she was sure it was a prank, but in the end, they sent Kims just in case, so she points out that they were given such important information way too easily. She wonders what the motive is. Shev says he doesn't know, but maybe it's someone inside Hydra holding a grudge against their own guild. Kims chimes in, saying they're not really in a position to be picky about things like that, since they were about to lose everything to Hydra. So he asks if he can start a fight to buy them some time. But Yell tells him no and says to fall back for now, since if that really is the corrupted count's location, then most of Hydra's forces must be there, and they can't afford to lose one of their top members right now. Kims says the leader is being too soft on him, since it's not like the Red Bulls will fall apart if he's not around. But at that moment, someone charges at him, and a massive explosion goes off. Shev and Yell are immediately concerned about their friend as the dust settles. Kims finds a sword pointed at his face and realizes they weren't the only ones who got the anonymous tip. He then starts laughing and announces that the Princess of the Thunder Hunters is there. She immediately demands that Kims tell her everything he knows, or she'll eliminate him right there. This is the Thunder Princess Howie from the Thunder Hunters Guild. Meanwhile, a bear growls fiercely as the protagonist's golem prepares for battle. The massive bear wastes no time and strikes the golem, which simply defends against the attacks. Eventually, it spots an opening and counterattacks, while the protagonist summons watch the fight. The battle rages on, and the skeletons are enjoying the show while eating popcorn. Hyrcan, however, is puzzled, checking his status and wondering why everything is so quiet, since he's sure the emails were sent, and he should be getting replies. He knows the only way to solve this without going to Babaru Forest is to force the mission to end. He's aware that Warlord's main story consists of many chapters. The current one is Chapter 1, The Corrupted Count. And when the Corrupted Count is defeated, the chapter ends, and all related missions are forcefully concluded. He takes a deep breath and realizes that even if he tried to defeat the corrupted Count himself, he wouldn't make it in time, so he prefers to move on to the next chapter within the remaining time. He then starts yelling that he doesn't care who it is. He just needs someone to defeat the corrupted Count. That's exactly why he's spreading the information to several guilds except for Chai Sol Yun's. So he wonders why no one is responding. Suddenly, something catches his attention. The system notifies him that the Hydra guild is starting a live stream. Meanwhile, his golem is being severely attacked, having its arms broken, and the giant bear doesn't stop, launching another powerful blow, but Hyrcan shows up, punching the bear in the head and telling it to shut up and stay quiet while he's thinking. He makes it clear that he needs to watch a stream, so he wants peace after sitting down to watch the live stream. A host greets all viewers and announces that the Hydra guild was the first to discover the identity of the corrupted Count and is planning to attempt a raid. The planned date for the raid is Hyrcan hopes it's sometime this month. Then the host says it'll be in 3 days, which really surprises the protagonist. The stream ends and he comments that it's sooner than expected. But not shocking, just as he predicted, he starts laughing like a maniac and thinks this is perfect. He then orders his golem to resume fighting the bear. While they fight, he remarks that Hydra probably got nervous because he spread the info to other guilds. Since he knows that if it's Hydra, there's nothing to worry about, they're far ahead of the other guilds in terms of progress on the main quest, and have many skilled players, so he concludes that once the main mission ends, his biggest obstacle will be gone, and in 3 days his happy life will begin. After some time, the 3 days pass and many players are being defeated. The system announces that all Hydra guild members died in the raid, and the mission failed. Leaving the protagonist in utter disbelief, he throws his phone to the ground and yells, demanding to know if they're messing with him. He shouts that if they were going to start the raid so early, the least they could have had was a plan. He wants to know why they even tried if they were going to fail in an hour. He also questions whether he overestimated them, and if he now needs to start looking for alternatives. Then he sees that the Red Bulls Guild has started a live stream. He quickly grabs his phone and wonders if Red Bulls is where the Slayer Shev is from. Meanwhile, in the game, Shev the Slayer comments that since the field is being reset, he assumes the Hydra Guild's raid failed. He then asks if his soldiers saw what happened. He explains that the corrupted Count is a powerful enemy, powerful enough to massacre even the Hydra Guild. And not only that, but they also won't have backup item supplies, meaning their chances of success will be very low. Even so, Shev slams his sword into the ground and shouts, making it clear that the Red Bulls Guild will accept the challenge. The soldiers immediately start yelling, fired up for the battle ahead. Jaehyun, watching the stream, wonders if the Red Bulls Guild is really going to start the corrupted Count quest. Since even though they're good, he knows it's still not enough. Then he's surprised to hear Shev announce that they'll be joined in the raid by their partner, the Guildmaster of the Thunder Hunters, the Queen of Thunder, Sil. This leaves the protagonist confused after realizing it's Chai Sol Yun. A bit earlier, at the Red Bulls camp, Shev was commenting on how unexpected it was that the Queen of Thunder herself requested a meeting, so he wants to know if she's declaring war. Sil replies no, that for now they're still allies. Shev looks at Kim's and says he heard one of his men got beaten up, while Sil says it was nothing, just their guild's way of saying hello. Wai sticks her tongue out at Kim's, teasing him. Shev then gets serious and asks to cut to the, saying he heard they have info on the corrupted. He pretends not to know what she's talking about, but Sil says she doesn't have time for games, and that she's confirmed some members of the top 30 guilds received information about the corrupted Count, and that since someone like him, who couldn't even begin tracking the Count, suddenly started doing it, even an idiot would notice. He laughs and admits she caught him, saying it's true, but notes they don't know who provided the tip. She gives a sinister laugh and asks if he really thinks the Hydra Guild will succeed. Shev says he's not sure. Sil replies they'll fail, and that they moved up the raid date just to be first. But she knows the corrupted Count is the first boss, so it won't be that easy. They'd have better chances if they let others go first to gather information. Shev gets serious and says he's sure she didn't come just to talk about Hydra, so what's her real point? She gives a slight smile, then slams her sword hard into the table, even surprising the Red Bulls leader. While Kim's gets ready for the worst, Shev signals him to stay calm. Sil asks if they can't work together on the corrupted Count raid, and says she'll let him get the first kill. Shev is quite surprised and thinks she's bluffing, but now, with her in the raid against the corrupted Count, he sees this was expected. Watching how she fights and slays raid monsters, he realizes she's not just talk still. He knows the corrupted count is no joke. As for the count himself, he laughs and says they're not doing bad for scum like them. This is the corrupted count, the main quest boss and final boss of Chapter 1. He then commands his creatures to attack without rest, and declares hell crush their will completely. Thus, an intense battle begins, with the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters alliance on one side, and the corrupted count on the other. As the fight drags on, Shev knows their allied forces are reaching their limit. Sil comments that the monsters just keep coming. Then, Shev steps forward, and unleashing his fearsome power, yells to the Queen of Thunder that hell clear a path for her. He launches a powerful forward strike, and she rushes in alongside him as Shev's mighty attack heads toward the corrupted count. The Queen of Thunder follows close behind. The boss becomes enraged and counterattacks, demanding to know how they dare challenge him. Sil tries with all her might to keep dodging the countless attacks from the corrupted count, until she leaps into the air, fully confident, and prepares her strike but ends up being severely hit, leaving her confused and trying to understand where the attacks came from. The corrupted count had buried his strikes into the ground, so they would come up behind her and intercept her midair. Shev, worried, shouts to know if she's okay. Sil takes a deep breath, gives a slight smile, then unleashes several attacks, breaking free and rushing toward the corrupted count. With eyes full of confidence, she manages to land her powerful blow on the boss. Shev breathes a sigh of relief and says she's scarier than he thought. And so, before the fallen body of the corrupted count, Sil sees the system message confirming that the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters guilds have defeated the corrupted count. The protagonist is stunned upon hearing that Chai Seol Yun defeated the boss of Chapter 1. He throws his phone to the ground and mutters that it doesn't matter, he only needed the corrupted count to be defeated and it didn't matter by whom. He then hopes Sil enjoys it while she can, because the corrupted count will be the last she gets. After all, he knows that in the end, the one whole win will be him. Sometime later, in the dungeon of the Bulkus Mountains, the protagonist is with his summons, thinking that his real name is Jae-hyun, and currently in the game he's Hiram. He's a warlord player who somehow reincarnated. His dream is to become the strongest in the game, to get revenge on the bastards who betrayed him. As he reflects on all this, he suddenly hears a tremendous noise around him, and before he realizes it, a herd of wild boars is charging straight at him, and he has to run to avoid being trampled. A few hours earlier, the protagonist arrived at the entrance to the Bulkus Mountains and saw that the field was blocked. While Little Bone is confused by the barrier, Hurricane explains that it's a locked field until someone meets a certain condition. Since he hasn't met it yet, entry is restricted. But he knows that the Bulkus Mountains are the main stage of Chapter 2 storyline, and that when the main quest of Chapter 1 is completed, entry is automatically granted. So after crossing the barrier, the system notifies him that he has entered the Bulkus Mountains and received the title of first to set foot in the Bulkus Mountains, increasing all his stats by 2 points and class-related attributes by 1 point. He gets excited and thinks, just as expected, no one else had discovered it yet. He calls his summons and declares that it's his time to shine, but he quickly comes face to face with several monsters. The monsters in question are all wild boars, level 60, fierce beasts that roam in packs. Hurricane, being only level 41, is shocked to encounter them right away back in the present. The boars are enraged and charging after the protagonist, who keeps running and wondering how he got so unlucky and how the hell he ran into those boars as soon as he entered. He also thinks some people have probably already noticed the blocked field is now open, so he can't afford to waste any more time there. He knows his chances are low, but still, it looks like he has to try. So he shouts for his summons to activate their helms and charge at the boars. However, the creatures are so strong that they easily defeat the protagonist's summons. As Hurricane retreats, thinking his summons were wiped out in a single hit, the system notifies that the skeleton warrior has been destroyed after taking too much damage. The protagonist then smiles and says, "That was just bait." He activates his Sloth Curse skill on the massive wild boars he approaches and tells them they won't be able to move for a while. Then, drawing his sword, he charges in and says it's time to pay for destroying his skeletons, until he steps on a banana peel and face plants right in front of the massive beasts. Then, another banana peel falls onto his head. Hurricane grows furious, demanding to know what the hell is going on and where the banana peel came from. Up on a tree branch, a monkey is laughing. It's a level 50 armored monkey, a monster known for playing tricks on humans. Hurricane gets even angrier, quickly stands up, and tells the monkey to wait, because he's about to get beaten up, but then the system notifies him that the effect of the sloth curse has worn off. He turns around in a panic, thinking this is IRL bad. Just then, a bright flash comes from his direction and completely shatters the wild boar's head. Hurricane is startled, trying to understand what just happened. Up in a tree, someone is firing a crossbow, releasing countless arrows that, in a blink, brutally wipe out several wild boars. Hurricane, amazed by how easily the monsters were taken down, wonders how it's possible with just one shot. Then the mysterious person approaches and asks if the protagonist is hurt. Hurricane turns and sees an old man, wondering if it could really be who he's thinking. Meanwhile, at Suryu Castle, two adventurers are surprised by what they see ahead. One of them notices a knight leaning against the wall and asks if that's the White Mamba's armor set. The other responds that it looks like it, and then asks if the person they're seeing is a ranker. The knight, visibly impatient, adjusts his glasses and asks if his companion has found the identity of the informant. A mage steps out from the shadows and says no, that none of the guilds know who sent the information. He adds that it makes sense after all. We're talking about someone who knew the identity of the corrupted count and was willing to give that information away for free. So how are they supposed to find someone like that? The knight also wants to know about the Haho mask. If his friend has any updates, the mage replies that he's just posting regular hunting videos, and that it seems to be something about giant bears. The knight begins to get angry while the continues, saying there's no way a newbie who just started the main storyline could be behind all this. He then asks where the knight's next assistant job will be. The knight says it'll be with the Sweepers Guild. The mage, frustrated, comments that it looks like they're going to be really busy again. The knight assures him he'll handle the assistant job, and asks his friend to focus on finding the person who leaked the information. He emphasizes that they don't know who this person is, but swears hell make sure they pay for destroying the balance of the world. Later, in a humble cabin in the Bulkus Mountains, the old man who saved the protagonist from the boars asks if he's really a disciple of the mage Ahimbri. All excited, Hurricane replies that he is, and thinks to himself how lucky he was he never thought he'd run into Ma Wang, the main NPC from Chapter 2's central storyline. The old man says that luckily he found the protagonist in time while out on patrol. Hurricane knows that Ma Wang is skilled enough to have once been the prince's sword instructor, but was expelled due to an unfortunate event. After that, he became the captain of the guards who protect the Bulkus Mountains. That's why Hurricane knows for sure he had to find this NPC in Chapter 2, and feels incredibly lucky. Ma Wang tells the protagonist that he should go back, which confuses him, so he asks the old man to clarify. Ma Wang explains that he doesn't know what brought Hurricane here, but there's nothing in that place except monsters. So again, he urges him to go back before something worse happens. Hurricane smiles and says the corrupted count is dead. He thinks to himself that there's no point in the old man playing hard to get, since he already knows how to enter Chapter 2. He then adds that even with the count's defeat, there are still corrupted monsters out there, and that he was tracking the source and ended up here. He then wants to know if the old man knows anything about it. The old man says he has something in mind, but no evidence yet, which is why he asks if the protagonist could help him gather some. With that, the system notifies that Hurricane has obtained the title of first to contact a Bulkus watchman, and also the title of initiator, granting him an additional 14 attribute points. Hurricane gets excited after learning he received 2 rare titles, and tells the old man that he can indeed help. Mong asks the protagonist to first calm down and then investigate the monsters near the area. Thus, the quest, the Bulkus Watchman's Request, is created, and Hurricane must defeat 50 monsters in the Bulkus Mountains with a reward of 500 gold coins and increased trust from Mong. Without wasting time, Hurricane heads out of the cabin, thinking this is great since he knew he needed to level up anyway. He then reflects that he'll leave the high-level monsters like wild boars and warrior bears for later and start with the easier ones. Until he remembers something, recalling how the armored monkey mocked him. He decides he'll start with it and wonders how he's going to make it pay. Later, still in the Bulkus Mountains dungeon, a player slips on a banana peel, followed by another. This keeps happening for a while, and the armored monkey just laughs at the players. Then another player starts walking by, and the monkey immediately sets its sights on its next victim. It gets ready, but Herkin suddenly appears behind it and says he finally found it. The monkey turns around awkwardly, and the protagonist, with a bizarre expression, says he's going to eliminate it. Without hesitation, he grabs his sword and charges at the creature. However, the armored monkey easily dodges all of the protagonist's attacks. Herkin tries everything to land a hit, but the monkey always evades. Then the monkey increases its speed and quickly flees. The protagonist chases after it. Furious while chasing the creature, he thinks about how annoying the monkey is so fast, and the trees keep getting in the way, making it hard to attack. So he stops on a tree branch, prepares an attack, and throws his sword at the monkey. The creature notices the attack coming and gets really scared. The protagonist's sword hits, but it lands right beside the monkey, scaring it even more. The creature starts laughing at the protagonist, but Herkin makes it clear that the sword attack was just a distraction. Right then, his golem appears and delivers a powerful punch, causing massive destruction. Herkin watches from afar, and it doesn't take long for the system to inform him that he has earned the title of being the first to hunt down and eliminate an armored monkey. Herkin is pleased, and thinks it's time to start hunting more of them. Meanwhile, several cameras are snapping photos, as Shev the Slayer and Syl the Queen of Thunder are there. They shout out congratulations to the Red Bull Guild's Red Bull, and to Syl from the Thunder Hunters for completing the first chapter's boss raid. Then, a reporter player approaches the Queen of Thunder and asks if she'd like to say something. She gives a slight smile and says she thinks they were really lucky this time, but they'll keep working hard to bring good results in the future. However, off camera, she looks displeased. Howie, walking with the Queen of Thunder, says she's the best. Then, he admits he thought they were done for when the last wave of monsters came, but then she appeared, jumped in alone, and defeated the corrupted Count. Syl says she was lucky, and emphasizes that they couldn't have done it without the Red Bulls. Still, she knows that to achieve a full victory, need the skills of the player known as Heiho Mask. Disappointed, she asks Howie to call Hatch. Shocked, he yells, wanting to know why the Queen of Thunder would need that loser. Syl becomes serious and makes it clear that there's something they need to hunt. Meanwhile, something is breaking, and the system soon informs that the protagonist's equipment durability has dropped to 0 and was destroyed. Herkin looks at his sword in frustration and thinks it's time to look for new gear. But he knows the problem is that he has no money. So, he concludes that his only option is to try for gems, since he knows they have a very low drop rate for monsters and are used to craft items. For example, the Green Goblin gem grants 1 extra point of dexterity, the Werewolf gem grants 2 extra points in the attack attribute. They also have additional effects depending on the monster they drop from. He then thinks that gems dropped by armored monkeys are great for making equipment. With that, he summons his creatures and shouts that they're gonna hunt every last armored monkey. 9 hours later, Herkin is devastated, as he had no success in getting any gem drops. And looking at the pile of countless armored monkeys, he wonders if a drop should have happened by now. Then, with a crazed expression, he tells his summons that hell try just one more, because he thinks maybe this time it will drop. Suddenly, someone approaches, calling out to the protagonist. A warrior in sinister armor says that Herkin must be Heiho Mask. The protagonist is intrigued, wondering who this person appearing out of nowhere could be. Looking more closely, he notices the man is decked out in a full and expensive fire lizard set, and wields a hero orc sword, meaning he's at least level 70. So he starts thinking maybe the guy is one of those players. The man introduces himself as Coyote. Then, he starts making some strange movements. And, as soon as he stops in a completely ridiculous pose, he officially challenges the duel. Herkin is confused, wondering what the hell the guy in front of him is doing, while Coyote comments that he heard the protagonist is getting popular on Tube, so he points out that beating him would make him popular too. Herkin thinks that he must be just another attention-starved loser. He turns away and says he's busy and tells him to get lost. Coyote yells, asking the protagonist to wait. Herkin, irritated, wonders why the gem isn't dropping, and now there's a crazy idiot bothering him. On top of it, Coyote shouts that he'll pay 5,000 gold if the protagonist fights him. Herkin stops when he hears that, quickly turns around and runs up to the player, saying he'll gladly accept the duel and welcomes him, calling him a customer and thinking that he loves customers. A few hours earlier, Coyote was thinking about himself, believing he was the hero of justice, and that, thanks to his talent, he, Coyote, was a hero who was always the center of attention, no matter what game he played well. At least that's what he thought, because in Warlord no one really paid much attention to him, since he always heard people saying it was much more fun to watch Heiho Mask, and as soon as he looked around, he saw that no one was paying attention to him, and he only heard people asking each other if they had seen the new video from Heiho Mask. That made him furious. He punched the ground and, thinking about Heiho Mask, began yelling that he was being buried by him because they started the game at the same time. Coyote knew his opponent's level was lower than his, and that he didn't even have good items, so he wondered why everyone loved him. Then, upon realizing something, he questioned where he was, since he had run off without thinking and ended up there. And as he looked ahead, he saw a player surrounded by little creatures, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was Heiho Mask. However, he knew that was supposed to be a blocked field, so why was he hunting there? Then he had an idea. What if he posted a video of himself defeating Heiho Mask? If it worked, could he steal all his fame? So back to the present. Coyote removes all his gear except his helmet and tells the protagonist that he'll give him 5,000 gold if he can beat him in a duel. Herkin can't believe what he's seeing and yells, wanting to know why the hell he's stripping. If he said he wanted to fight, Coyote replies that it's to make it a fair fight and emphasizes that, from what he heard, it seems the protagonist's armor just broke. Herkin doesn't like hearing that. He didn't expect his opponent to know about it. Coyote insists that what he wants is a fair unknown battle, and that he doesn't want anyone saying he only won because of his gear, which is why he asked the protagonist to give it his all. Still in disbelief, Herkin wants to know if his opponent really thinks he'll take him seriously dressed like that. But as Coyote charges at him without hesitation, he shouts for them to cut the chatter and just fight already. Herkin dodges the first strike and points out that Coyote should listen when people talk, but the player doesn't care and keeps launching a flurry of attacks, forcing Herkin to dodge all of them. Coyote gets irritated and demands that the protagonist fight back instead of just defending. While still dodging, Herkin tells Coyote to make him do it, which enrages him even more, prompting him to activate his booster skill and throw a powerful punch. Herkin worries if he'll have time to dodge, but ends up getting hit and is sent flying. Lying on the ground, Herkin realizes his opponent just used the booster skill, a warrior class ability that speeds up movement for a moment. Watching Coyote from a distance and seeing his aura, he reflects that, although he may look like an idiot, his level seems higher than his own. So he concludes that facing him head-on is a bad idea. Then he gets an idea. He gets up from the ground, and Coyote comments that it looks like the protagonist is finally ready to face him. He tells him to go all out because he'll surpass his best. As he charges again, yelling that he's gonna show everyone he's stronger than Heiho Mask, he activates his booster ability once more. But Herkin throws dirt at Coyote's eyes, and while he's distracted, the protagonist sweeps his legs out from under him, making him lose balance and tumble to the ground. Herkin makes it clear to his opponent that, if his strength stat is higher, he just needs to overcome it with his own skills. That said, he lands a powerful kick to Coyote's face, followed by a strong uppercut, launching Coyote hard into a tree. The player trembles with rage, calls Herkin a coward, and demands to know how he considers what he just did a skill. The protagonist responds that no one cares about that when fighting for their life. Herkin laughs and makes it clear to Coyote that he lost because he'd rather stick to his pride than focus on winning. Then, he activates his skin grafting skill, Armored Monkey Hide, and the system immediately notifies that the protagonist has been strengthened with the Armored Monkey's attributes. Coyote becomes very worried and thinks that if he's hit by that, he'll definitely die with a sinister aura. Herkin tells Coyote that he's the one who started this fight, so he better be ready for it. As he charges toward the player, Coyote starts screaming, asking the protagonist to wait. Then he starts crying and says he surrenders. However, the protagonist can't stop his attack, and a massive wave of destruction follows. Fortunately, and luckily for Coyote, Herkin manages to change the direction of his blow, hitting right beside his opponent's head. The tree and everything behind it are completely destroyed. Coyote trembles in fear, thinking it was so terrifying that he almost forgot he was in a game. Herkin laughs and tells Coyote to hand over the 5,000 gold already. However, he adds that he's sure his opponent would prefer not to be forcibly logged out for 2 days, so he suggests they settle things peacefully from now on. Coyote removes his helmet and shouts that Heiho Mask is an amazing guy. He also says the protagonist is so strong and impressive, which scares him, wondering what's gotten into this guy. The blonde emphasizes that he, Coyote admits defeat and hands over the 5,000 gold he promised, along with his sword. Herkin looks at the sword in his hand and realizes it's the hero orc sword, marveling at it, saying he knows it grants plus 66 strength, plus 66 vitality, and also ignores 9 of defense, and figures it must be worth at least 15,000 gold at auction. However, he tries to stay calm and asks why the blonde is giving him such a rare item. Coyote smiles and asks the protagonist to consider it a token of his gratitude. He then explains that he had been blinded by popularity all this time and didn't work hard to actually get stronger, and that Herkin made him realize that. With that, he strikes a ridiculous pose and asks the protagonist to please accept it, emphasizing that he's truly worthy of becoming his brother. Herkin is dumbfounded by the scene before him and wonders if that's really the reason he gave him the sword. But he also knows that while Coyote may seem like an idiot, he might have a cool side still. He kicks the blonde and asks if that's what he thought he was going to say, then tells him to go to hell and fuck off. He then tells his summons to get him. Later, Coyote is left with a swollen face after getting thoroughly beaten. He tries to explain again, saying his full name is Don Coyote, and that hell return when he becomes worthy of being the protagonist's brother. As Herkin walks off with his summons, Coyote continues shouting that he'll be looking forward to the day they meet again. The protagonist smiles and comments that it looks like Coyote is having fun with the game. Then, changing the subject, he starts laughing like a madman while looking at his new sword and says that now that he's got it, he won't need to hunt armored monkeys anymore. He reflects that now he should be ready to take on the next quest, but suddenly turns with a calm expression and asks his summons if maybe he should just hunt 100 more armored monkeys because he feels like something really good will drop this time. All his summons hate the idea and start grabbing him, trying to stop him from going after that. After returning and handing in the requested items, NPC Ma Wong says it was 950 armored monkeys, 100 four-fang wolves, and 76 venomous lizards. He praises the protagonist, saying he did a great job, adds that the investigation is progressing well thanks to him, but wants to know what's with that expression on the protagonist's face. Herkin gets embarrassed, apologizes, and says he was just thinking about how to spend the money he earned. Wong stands up and says that since the next quest will be especially dangerous, he points to the map and explains that near the mountain peak, a warrior bear has appeared. He adds that warrior bears are about 4 meters tall and are equipped with armor like human warriors, so he emphasizes that if the protagonist can find out where they're getting their weapons from, it would greatly help in discovering the identity of the corrupted one. Herkin stands up from the chair and comments that, in other words, Wong wants him to defeat them and bring back one of their weapons. The NPC asks if the protagonist thinks he'll be okay going alone, since even guards have trouble dealing with them solo, and suggests he should look for someone else. But Herkin makes it clear he'll be fine and already knows how to handle warrior bears. Not long after, Herkin arrives at a place near the mountain and thinks this must be the spot. He then calls his summons and, all excited, says it's time to spend a little. When he opens the auction window, the system informs him that he can now participate in auctions with other players. Herkin has in mind that the best item he can buy at his current level is the skeletal snake set. He then buys the shoulder guard, followed by the boots, gloves, and helmet from the same set. The system informs him that his defense has increased by 70 points, mana by 34, and strength by 34 as well, and that his mana consumption will now be reduced by 10 when the full set is equipped. It also shows that he spent 37,196 gold. Herkin tries to contain himself but can't, and starts spinning on the ground upside down, saying that so this is what it feels like to have money, and that he'll buy all the skill books for his level with the gold he has left. Soon after, the system announces that he has bought the skill books for Corrosive Spirit, Blindness, Muscle Modification, False Heart, Bone Bomb, and Hardening, and that the total for all those books was 17,593 gold. Even more excited, Herkin says he knows he's still a bit below the warrior bear's level, but with all that, he thinks he'll be fine. Then one of his summons taps him on the shoulder, and when he turns to see what it is, he finds all his summons staring at him with a strange expression, as if asking whether he's not going to give them anything. Herkin turns back and admits he forgot about them, and will look for something nice for them. However, the system informs him that he currently has insufficient funds, which makes him worried, wondering if he's already broke again. So, feeling awkward, he turns to them and says, looks like his money ran out. Herkin immediately gets scared when he sees that the attitude of his summons has turned creepy, while he tries to explain that it wasn't on purpose. Some creatures appear behind him without any warning or order, His summons charge at the creatures. While the protagonist shouts that maybe hell get more money when they eliminate them, Hyrkin feels a bit relieved watching his summons finish off the boars and thinks, thankfully, some wild creatures showed up at the perfect time a few moments later. The last wild boar is tied up with a very sad face, and Boney is licking his sword with a very sinister look. Hyrkin tells them to stop wasting time and finish off the boar already, as hell equipped them on the way. Then, out of nowhere, a powerful attack hits the big boar. The protagonist immediately turns to see who did that, and soon some players appear demanding to know who he thinks he is, hunting there without permission since that area belongs to the Apollo Guild. Hyrkin pauses and, looking at the players in front of him, concludes that they're just another bunch of losers. The guys introduce themselves. One says his name is Zhang, the other Wang Zhang, and finally the last one Il Zhang, and they declare they are the great trio of the Apollo Guild. Hyrkin laughs and says he gets it, but without any mercy or pity, he quickly launches several consecutive attacks on all three. He then makes it clear they're just a bunch of losers trying to annoy him, turning away. He wonders why he's been attracting so many people lately, and considers that maybe he needs to see a shaman or something. As he leaves with his summons, saying he just wasted his time there, the players are left trembling on the ground, but Wang Zhang, using what little strength he has left, thinks that the protagonist actually dared to lay a hand on his guild, and that they'll make him regret it, so he taps his watch and reports everything that happened to his superiors. Not long after, a man next to a giant tiger, upon hearing about the earlier incident, wants to know if the protagonist really attacked his subordinates. Even after hearing his name, the guild member confirms it, and emphasizes that's what Wang Zhang reported. The guild leader then tosses a gold bar to the member, and orders him to bring the protagonist in. No matter the cost, he then makes it clear that hell make him pay for disrespecting his name. Meanwhile, Hyrkin is impressed, seeing a beautiful view and realizing he's reached the area where warrior bears spawn. He turns and calls for his summons, only to see them striking ridiculous poses, and quickly demands to know what the hell they're doing. After smacking each one on the head, he yells for them to stop fooling around. He then declares that they're going to hunt a warrior bear, which is level 70 and has 3 phases, so they need to prepare for this battle. He emphasizes that defeating the bear will put them ahead of the top 30 guilds in terms of main quest progress. He stresses that he expects no mistakes from his summons. They immediately salute, signaling that they understand. Hyrkin then hears a loud roar, takes a deep breath, turns and says, "Speak of the devil." The enormous warrior bear appears right in front of them. Hyrkin activates his watch and quickly equips his battle gear. Confident, he declares that he's going to claim this main quest for himself. Meanwhile, a guy thinks that this must be the Bulkus Mountains, and hopes that Heiho Mask is still around, since he came to the location right after watching the video about the armored monkey. He takes a deep breath, starts banging his head against a tree, and wonders why the hell he has to go to the ends of the earth, since he was supposed to be someone important, and ended up being ordered to fetch a rookie. As he starts shouting, wondering how hell even managed that because it feels like a crime, a wild boar king is about to attack him. He turns when he hears the noise, but without doing anything dramatic, simply conjures a magic circle and unleashes a powerful hellfire attack on the creature, burning it completely. This is Ballista Hatch of the Thunder Hunters Guild, also ranked 5th among all mages in Warlord, and he's just hoping Heiho Mask shows up soon. Back to the protagonist's battle, the massive bear lets out a loud roar, and Hyrkin remembers that before his regression, when he challenged the bear along with his guild members, they failed 6 times before barely defeating it. But he knows that if he fails again this time, he'll lose his lead in the main quest to someone else. So he reflects that to land an effective hit on the warrior bear, he'll need to aim for gaps in its armor and remove it. As he keeps thinking that he can do this, now that he's prepared with his new skills, the massive bear charges at him in a fury. Hyrkin smiles and tells his summons to act on his signal. He then charges at the beast, thinking that his new passive skill, leg strength modification, will be highly effective. However, his speed is so high that he ends up overshooting and flying right past the bear. Hyrkin tries to make sense of what the hell just happened, while the bear and the summons just watch him soar through the air. But without wasting any time, the massive bear attacks the protagonist's summons, and the system reports that the warrior bear completely wiped out the skeletons, which makes Hyrkin furious. The protagonist looks into his leg strength modification skill, which boosts leg power, allowing faster and stronger movement. He gets even more enraged and yells that there's a limit to fast and strong. He then spots a nearby rock, heads toward it, and once again uses his acceleration, charging full force at the warrior bear. But he's so fast that he crashes straight into the bear, which is left wondering what the hell this crazy human is trying to do. Meanwhile, Hirkin marvels at the creature's fur. It's really soft, but he's quickly struck and thrown hard into a rock while lying on the ground. He thinks that his leg strength is too much and he can't control it. Still, he managed to rip off part of the warrior bear's armor, but he questions how useful that really is, because if his skills are acting like this, he wonders how he'll land an effective attack without wasting time. The giant bear charges at him again. And when it delivers a powerful blow, Hirkin is forced to dodge at the last second. He then starts channeling his power and activates Bone Bomb, which creates a bomb using mana, and he throws it right into the creature's face, causing a massive explosion. However, it only enrages the bear even more. Hirkin starts to panic, thinking this is way too hard and that ever since it came to this, he might have to give up on direct attacks, so he uses his mana to restore and summon his skeletal warriors again. He then states that he has no choice but to fight like a proper necromancer, but he quickly notices the strong distrust in his little summons' faces. So he shouts that this time he'll do it properly. Next, he summons his golem, which immediately appears and attacks the massive warrior bear. The bear doesn't stand still. It strikes the golem with its powerful attack. Hirkin smiles, thinking he still has one last card up his sleeve. He then uses the hardened skill on the golem. Making it more durable with that, he snaps his fingers and orders his summons to attack. They quickly charge at the bear, whose sword is being held back by the golem. The skeletal warriors manage to land their hits, but this only serves to make the creature even angrier. However, Hirkin makes it clear the bear shouldn't be mad yet. There's still one big attack left. He then yells for his skeletal mage to finish it off, but both he and the warrior bear get caught in the flames of the skeleton mage's attack. Hirkin can't believe he got hit too, so he turns furiously and shouts, calling his summon an idiot and saying it was supposed to wait until he got out of the way. At that moment, the warrior bear lets out a massive roar, and the system reports that the creature used its battlecry skill, allowing it to recover 50 of the damage taken, and it quickly charges at the protagonist, who's still distracted by his summon. Hirkin takes a deep breath, turns around laughing, and declares that he doesn't care about strategy. Brute force and numbers are always the best option. Then he throws multiple bone bombs at the bear, causing an overwhelming explosion visible from far away. The summons can't believe what their master is doing, but he doesn't care and continues bombing the warrior bear nonstop. Time passes on top of the fallen creature. The system reports that he defeated the warrior bear and that the protagonist's experience increased. He also received 100 for gold. Thus, the NPC Wang's judgment quest was completed. Hirkin looks at his trembling hand and thinks that the warrior bear was the one his entire guild struggled against before his regression. He then clenches his fist tightly, thinking that now he managed to defeat it alone, and that means he wasn't wrong after all. So he walks over to his summons and tells them they did a great job, and that now he can return to the NPC guard and proceed with the next quest. And, striking a ridiculous pose, he shouts that the extermination of the warrior bear is complete. But when he sees his summons talking among themselves, saying that he did it without fighting properly, Hirkin goes absolutely nuts and yells at them to shut up. Meanwhile, at the tavern in the western base of Bulkus, while a few warriors are laughing, the mage Ballista is sitting alone in the corner. He takes a deep breath and, on the verge of losing his sanity, thinks about how he still hasn't found Haho Mask. He also reflects that he's been combing the mountains for days, and the guy is nowhere to be found. To make things worse, Haho Mask's video has gone viral, which means the Bulkus Mountains will probably be crowded soon, making his mission even harder. He starts banging his head on the table, and concludes that if he returns without the protagonist, Lady Syl will kill him. He then questions whether it's not a bit absurd for his lady to ask him to search an entire mountain alone looking for one man. The mage gets frustrated and curses the Thunder Hunters Guild, not noticing his watch making noise. Then he realizes he's in a call with Syl. He quickly jumps from his seat, trembling, and tries to apologize, saying that's not what he meant. But she replies that he's working hard, which makes him a little uneasy. Syl says she thinks the task she gave him was unreasonable after all. He's searching an entire mountain on his own, and that she understands how hard it must be even for him. The mage is stunned by her words. He starts laughing, saying he's fine, that it's no problem at all, and asks if he can get back to the mission. Syl then tells him that she sent Hahue to help out of nowhere. An explosion goes off in the tavern, blasting a hole in the wall. As Hatch turns around startled, Syl makes it clear that the two will work together to find Heiho Mask. Someone walks through the hole and yells at the mage, calling him an idiot. It's none other than the Princess of Thunder, Hahue of the Thunder Hunters Guild, who's furious, and tells Hatch that it's his fault she had to come all the way there. Hatch is stunned, thinking she's one of the people who hate him. He screams that he hates this rotten world. Later, someone from above comments that Bulkus seems to be getting pretty crowded, and that even a village has formed. It's the protagonist, who also mentions that most players have probably realized this is now the main search area. He then takes off at full speed, leaping from tree to tree, thinking he has to hurry and reach NPC Woong until he sees 3 guys coming his way, and upon closer look, notices their clothes resemble those of the 3 guys he saw earlier. So he wonders if they're there to get revenge for their friends. He closes his eyes, and tells them to attack already because he doesn't have time, but he doesn't realize they run right past him without paying any attention. He turns around, confused, trying to understand. They just shout for help. Hirkin is puzzled, saying he didn't do anything, but doesn't notice something approaching. In a blink, the 3 guys are brutally attacked, and Hirkin's face gets scratched in the process. He turns to see what's going on, and sees 2 people. It's Hahue, the Princess of Thunder, and the mage Hatch. Upon noticing the emblem on their clothes, Hirkin realizes they're members of the Thunder Hunters Guild, but he's quickly startled by a sword pointed straight at him. Hahue demands to know if he's the guy called Heiho Mask from the videos. Hirkin recalls that Hahue is the second in command of the Thunder Hunters, and also a fanatic who would crawl through hell if Syl ordered it. And the other one is the level 3 mage of the Thunder Hunters, nicknamed Ballista, a genius mage who never lets a target escape. He also remembers that, before his regression, they were the biggest threats, and he never imagined he'd run into them here. However, he reflects that, seeing as they're looking for Heiho Mask, they're probably there for guild recruitment, but he'd love to kill them all, even though he knows that's impossible right now. So he climbs down from the tree, and asks if they're really looking for Heiho Mask. He plays dumb and acts like a fool, asking who that person even is. While putting on a ridiculous act, he laughs internally, thinking hell just keep playing dumb since they won't be able to do anything without proof. But Hahue suddenly approaches him with a sinister look and yells that he's lying. The Thunder Princess' gaze grows even more terrifying, as she explains that there's no way someone could cross the Bulkus Mountains without hearing about Heiho Mask. Especially since that idiot's video hit 20 million views. She emphasizes that the hood the protagonist is wearing reminds her very much of Heiho Mask, which is why she really wants to know if he's the one they're after. Hirkin gets nervous, realizing she's very sharp. The mage steps in and tells them to stop, saying that's not the issue right now. He then points at the Thunder Princess' forehead and yells that the problem is her. He starts ranting that she destroyed the inn, killed people just because she thought they were suspicious, and now he wants to know how she plans to fix all this, since everyone knows their guild and they won't even be able to deny it. Hatch starts shouting even louder, demanding that she apologize quickly before the guild's reputation takes a hit because of her. Hahue also gets flustered and yells back, asking why the hell she should have to apologize. Hirkin watches, stunned, wondering if they've always been like this. Eventually, Hahue, visibly annoyed, mutters an apology. Hatch watches her walk off and asks what kind of dumb behavior that was. He then turns to the protagonist, apologizes for his partner, and wishes him a good game. But as Hirkin sighs in relief, thinking he narrowly avoided trouble, he fails to notice someone rushing at him when he sees a fist flying straight at his face. He's terrified, and before he can react, he's punched by the Thunder Princess and slammed into a rock. Hatch loses it, grabs Hahue, and screams, demanding to know why the hell she hit someone again. Did he call her a mad dog? Or has she actually gone crazy? She replies that she thought the protagonist would at least dodge her punch. Hirkin wants to know if they really just assaulted an innocent user who had his guard down. So he calls them out. Then, putting on glasses, he announces that he's formally filing a complaint against the Thunder Hunters Guild. He opens the forum window and explains that first, he'll post it on the official forums to make it public, and the title will be, Thunder Hunters is a cruel guild that massacres newbies. The mage panics and quickly apologizes, saying they'll compensate him, and begging him to just forget about it if possible. So Hatch hands the protagonist a handful of gold coins, and Hirkin comments that since the mage is offering 1,000 gold coins as a gesture of sincerity, hell let it go. Hatch breathes a sigh of relief, and thanks him. He then grabs Howie's arm and while dragging her away, yells that he can't stand her. Hirkin knows what he just did is pathetic, but for now, it's the best option because he's fully aware that provoking them carelessly would be a disaster. That's why he knows he just needs to endure this a little longer as they walk away. Hatch asks why the hell she causes problems every single time, and if she doesn't realize image management is vital for a major guild. Slightly confused, Howie wonders if people don't instinctively dodge when attacked. Hatch asks if she's seriously trying to say it's his fault for not dodging her punch. She replies that it's not that, it's just that guy. He looked like he was just annoyed seeing the attack coming his way, almost as if he thought he had no choice but to take the hit. Hatch says he's begging her, and asks if she can just be quiet. She tells him to shut up and calls him a loser. Meanwhile, the protagonist returns to NPC Woong's house and hands over a piece of the warrior bear's armor. Woong comments that this was expected, and that something is definitely going on. He thanks the protagonist once again, and emphasizes that if it weren't for him, there would have been many casualties. However, he wants to know if he's okay. Since he sees him trembling, Herkin replies that he's fine, but is thinking that the NPC needs to hurry up and move on, because if there's any delay, the top 30 guilds will catch up with that. The NPC grabs a chest and places it on the table. As he opens it, he asks the protagonist to pick just one.